Hello everyone, Mr. Paranormal M is here. It's another favorite moment of the day, sitting down with the mic and imagining that you're next to me telling me fascinating paranormal stories. Don't forget to leave comments below the video. Thank you very much. And now, cover yourself with a blanket and listen to the stories that are for us today. By the way, I'm happy to know that I and these stories can soothe and help you. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let's get started. Alright, so this is my parents' story, not mine, but I've heard it so many times it feels like I was there. Right after my parents, Lena and Marco, got married, they were just trying to start a simple life together. They weren't looking for anything fancy, just a place they could afford while my mom finished her teaching program and my dad worked at the factory. They found this little rental house on the edge of town. 3 rooms if you counted the tiny office, 1 bathroom, old wood floors that creaked in all the wrong places. It was close to my dad's job and cheap, so they took it. For about a month, everything was normal. Small, a little drafty, but normal. Then my dad's grandmother, my great-grandma Ruth, brought over a gift. She'd found this old, wind-up clown music box at a thrift store. You know the kind. Porcelain face, painted smile, little ruffled collar. When you wound it up, the clown turned slowly in a circle and played this tinny lullaby that sounded like it came straight out of a horror movie. My mom has always hated clowns, like close her eyes during circus commercials kind of hate. She thought it was super creepy, but she didn't want to hurt Ruth's feelings. So she thanked her, smiled, and set the clown up on a shelf in the kitchen, next to the salt and pepper shakers. For a few days, it just sat there. Then one afternoon, my mom walked past it, and it just started playing on its own. No one had touched it. She hadn't bumped the shelf. The key wasn't wound. It just started turning and playing that little song. She tried to shrug it off. It's old. Maybe it's loose. Whatever. But it kept happening. She'd be washing dishes, and it would start spinning behind her. She'd walk into the kitchen at night to get water, and it would suddenly play one slow, warped lap of the tune. Sometimes she'd wake up at 3 a.m. and hear that faint melody drifting down the hallway from the kitchen. Finally, she'd had enough. One day while my dad was at work, she took the clown down, wrapped it in a grocery bag, marched it out to the outdoor garbage bin, tossed it in, and slammed the lid. She actually apologized out loud to Great-Grandma Ruth, and then told herself that was that. A few days later, after trash day had already come and gone, she went into the kitchen to make coffee. And there it was. The clown was sitting back on the same shelf, in the exact same spot, like it had never left. She said her whole body went cold. She called my dad's mom, my grandma Elena, and asked her to come over. When Elena arrived, my mom pointed straight at the shelf and said, "Please tell me you put that there." Elena shook her head no, walked over, and picked it up. The second she lifted it, the clown's head started spinning around rapidly, but the body didn't move. No music, just the head turning, faster and faster, like it was on a separate motor. My grandma is very religious. She froze for a second, then clutched it by the base, started praying out loud, and told my mom, "I'm getting this out of here." She drove it straight to the dump herself and threw it into one of the big industrial containers. They never saw it again. But after that, the whole house felt wrong, like something had been stirred up. Not long after, my mom was outside alone, unloading groceries from the car. It was late afternoon, almost sunset, that weird golden light. As she closed the trunk, she noticed a man standing by the big oak tree at the edge of the yard. He was tall, really tall, in this long dark coat and an old-fashioned black hat, like the kind you'd see in old photos. He was just standing there, about 10 or 15 feet away, staring straight at her. She said his face wasn't exactly in shadow, but she couldn't make out his expression. It was like her eyes just wouldn't focus on it. She didn't look back. She bolted for the front door, fumbled with her keys, threw herself inside, slammed the door, and locked it. When she finally got the nerve to peek through the front window, he was gone. She told my dad when he got home. He tried to calm her down. He told her it was probably just some creep cutting through the neighborhood, maybe high, maybe drunk. "He's not coming back," he said. "Just some weirdo." She wanted to believe him. A little while later, her niece and nephew, Nora and Eli, came to stay the night. My dad was out night fishing with a friend, so it was just my mom and the kids. In the middle of the night, maybe around 2, they came running into her room, sobbing. Nora was shaking, and Eli kept saying, "Make him go away, Aunt Lena. Make him go away." My mom sat them down, tried to calm them, and asked what happened. They both said the same thing. A tall man wearing a black hat had been standing at the foot of the bed, just watching them. He didn't move. He didn't speak. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. That wasn't the last time either. Every time they came over and stayed the night, they said they saw him again, standing in the hallway, in the doorway, next to the window. Eventually, they refused to sleep over at all. After that, things escalated. One evening, while my dad was out fishing again, my mom was in the living room when she heard this violent crashing sound coming from the spare room, the one where they kept the pool table and a desk. She said it sounded like all the furniture in that room was being slammed into the walls, over and over. The kind of sound where you feel it in your chest. She froze for a moment, then grabbed the phone and called her mom, my Nana. Nana told her, "Get out of the house, right now. Take your keys and go sit in the car. Call Marco and tell him to come home." So that's what she did. She waited outside, shaking, watching the house, listening as the crashing went on, and then suddenly stopped. When my dad got home, he went straight inside with my mom behind him. They opened the door to the spare room. Everything was exactly where it had been. The pool cues were neatly racked. The chairs were lined up under the window. The desk chair was pushed in. Nothing was broken. Nothing was even slightly moved. After that night, my mom refused to stay in the house alone. If my dad was working late or fishing, she'd pack a bag and go to Nana's until he was back. She just didn't feel safe there, even in the daytime. But avoiding the house didn't stop what was happening. Not long after, this old woman started showing up. She'd appear in their front yard at night, always under the same big oak tree. My mom described her as small and hunched, with gray hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in a long time. Her clothes were layered and dirty, and she would just stand there, sometimes rocking slightly, sometimes wringing her hands, mumbling to herself in a voice too low to understand. She came back again and again, several times a week. She never came up to the door. She just stood under that tree, mumbling into the dark. By around the 10th time, my dad snapped. One night he saw her out there and said, "That's it." He went outside and yelled, "Hey, you need to get off our property." She didn't react at first, just kept mumbling. Then she slowly lifted her head and looked at him. He said the way she looked at him made every hair on his body stand up. In this hoarse whisper, she said, "You can't take all of us away." That's all. Just that. He told her to leave or he'd call the police. She eventually turned and shuffled off down the road. They never saw her again, but that sentence stayed with both of them. You can't take all of us away. Like there was more than one, whatever it was, in that place. So they called one of the owners of the house to come check the wiring. The place had belonged to two brothers who'd inherited it after their father died there. One of the brothers agreed to come over and take a look. My mom didn't want to be alone with him, especially with everything going on, so she asked my Nana to stay with her that day. Nana knew the whole story by then. The clown, the man in the hat, the crashing, the woman under the tree. She showed up with a small bag and quietly went around hanging crosses on the walls. One in the hallway, one above the couch, one in the kitchen, and a small one right above the front door. A little while later, the brother pulled up. My mom opened the door and stepped aside, saying, "Come on in." He put one foot across the threshold, just one, and then suddenly jerked it back like he'd stepped onto something hot. His face went pale. He glanced quickly around the doorway, eyes flicking up to the cross over the door, then back at the inside of the house. He cleared his throat and said, "Actually, I'm gonna have someone else come take a look. I can't do it today." And he left. Just like that. Didn't even step properly inside. Later on, a neighbor filled them in on something they didn't know. The brother's father had been a tall, mean man who always wore a black hat. Everyone on the street had been afraid of him. He died in that house. That clicked a lot of things into place for my parents. By that point, they were done. My dad picked up 2 extra side jobs. My mom cut every expense she could. They were determined to get out of that house as soon as they possibly could. Little by little, they saved enough to move. And here's the strange part. Once they left, everything stopped. No more footsteps. No more clown music. No more man in the hat. No old woman muttering under the tree. Their new place felt normal, quiet, peaceful. Almost too quiet at first, but in a good way. About a year later, they were living across the street from my dad's parents. Life was finally calm. One night they were driving home from dinner and decided to take a shortcut through a part of town they didn't usually go through anymore. The car suddenly sputtered and died in the middle of the road. My dad swore under his breath, put the hazards on, and they both got out to see what was wrong. When they looked around, trying to get their bearings, my mom realized where they were. They had broken down right in front of their old rental house. Same broken shutter on the window, same leaning mailbox, same oak tree in the yard. The house looked darker somehow. Not abandoned exactly, but empty. Like it was holding its breath. My dad didn't waste any time. He got back in, did a quick jump start with the portable pack he kept in the trunk, and the car turned over like nothing had ever been wrong. As soon as it started, he drove away. They didn't even look back. That was about 25 years ago. No one in my family has had anything truly strange happen since then. The old house isn't listed anywhere now. We don't know if anyone lives there, if it's rented out quietly, or if it's just slowly falling apart behind overgrown bushes. I've never driven by it. I don't plan to. My parents still tell this story sometimes, usually when the power flickers or someone mentions haunted houses. They always end it the same way, with this weird mix of gratitude and fear. Grateful that whatever was there stayed there, and afraid of whoever decided to move in after them. You know, there's a place in Edinburgh I can't quite shake from my mind. Not up on the castle hill, not along the busy Royal Mile you've probably walked, but just beneath your feet. Right under those cobbles, wrapped in centuries of stone, there's a forgotten street called Mary King's Close. Most people pass by without a clue. They buy their shortbread, snap their photos, and never realize that below them lie rooms that were never truly emptied. If you and I were there right now, and I stopped you on the pavement and said, "Hey, do you know what's underneath you?" You'd probably laugh. But I'd point down and tell you, once, this was a living, breathing street. Back in 1645, when the plague tore through Edinburgh, this place was crammed with families. In a matter of months, thousands were gone. The city shut itself tight. Doors were marked with white crosses brushed on in lime. A warning, a sentence, and a farewell all at once. Imagine it. Your door painted in silence, then bolted shut. You hear the carts out in the street, the weeping next door, and then finally, nothing. When the cries stopped, what remained were bodies and an air so heavy with fear and grief it felt like a weight on your chest. The city buried its dead. Then it buried its memories. And eventually, it buried its own streets. Down in those sealed corridors, people say a child's voice still lingers. Not a scream, not a wail, just a soft, tired crying. They call her Elsie now. The story most people tell starts in the late 1980s, when a Japanese medium named Reiko Mori joined one of the underground tours. She wasn't expecting anything dramatic. It was just meant to be another stop on a long European trip. But when Reiko stepped into a small, low-ceilinged room off one of the narrow closes, she stopped cold. Something small, cold, desperate, brushed against her leg, like a child pressing close to an adult for comfort. In her mind, as clearly as if the girl were standing there, Reiko saw a little child in a simple dress, cheeks streaked with tears, holding out empty hands. "I lost my doll," the girl's voice said, over and over. "I lost my doll." Reiko left the tour in tears. She went back up to the surface, walked into a shop on the mile, and bought a tiny rag doll in a tartan dress. Then she came back down into that same little room, knelt on the cold stone floor, and gently placed the doll in the corner. People on the tour say the change was instant. The air that had felt tight and miserable suddenly seemed to ease, like a long-held breath finally being released. From that day on, the guides began calling it Elsie's room. Over the years, visitors started bringing their own gifts: dolls, soft toys, bracelets, tiny notes, sweets left carefully in the dust. Now that cramped stone chamber is piled high with bright plastic faces and cotton bears and little offerings from all over the world. They say it's to comfort her, a child who lived and suffered and died in the time of plague, still waiting for the toy that never came home. But here's the part that unsettles even the guides. In 2017, that first rag doll, the tartan one Reiko brought, vanished, just gone. Some people shrugged and said, well, of course, it was stolen, tourists. But others lowered their voices and whispered that Elsie finally took it back. Since then, visitors have reported odd things. A few swear they've seen the outline of a small figure at the end of the corridor, just on the edge of the emergency light. Others feel a sudden cold hand brush the back of their knee, as if a child is trying to get their attention. Some say that when the room is very quiet, they hear a tune being hummed, off-key, soft, and close to their ear, even though no one is standing beside them. Heavier, they say, like the room is awake. And Elsie, they say, is not alone down there. People believe the spirits of the plague workers, the foul clangers, still move through those stone passages. They were the ones sent to carry away the dead, the lowest of the low, paid little, respected less. At night, they'd drag sacks and roll barrels filled with bodies over the cobblestones, lime dust caking their clothes, the smell of death never leaving their lungs. Many of them died the same way as the people they tried to help, quickly, quietly, and without a name. Even now, guests in the nearby buildings sometimes ring reception to complain about old wooden carts rattling somewhere in the middle of the night. But there are no carts, no deliveries, just the remembered sound of wooden wheels echoing through stone. And every so often, someone finds a strange gray dust along the skirting boards or in the folds of a carpet, dust that looks oddly like the lime once scattered over plague pits to hurry decay. Then there's the darkest rumor of all: live burial. Some say that at the height of the plague, the city simply walled off Mary King's Close, bricked it up, left the sick and the healthy sealed in together, trapped to die side by side so the infection wouldn't spread. Is it true? Well, historians roll their eyes. They'll tell you that records show food and coal were delivered to the people down there, that the idea of shutting them in and walking away is just a myth that's grown over time. But stories don't care about official reports. Sometimes, the tales people tell feel more powerful than the truth, because the thought of being buried alive, of pounding on a wall that no one will ever open, stays with you longer than any date in a textbook. Even today, locals say that on very still nights, they hear faint knocking inside the brickwork. Sometimes, when the har, that thick Scottish mist, rolls down into the closes, people see pale figures step out of it, eyes dazed, asking softly, "How do I get home?" And before anyone can answer, they're gone. If any ghost deserves to remain, though, it might be the plague doctor himself. You know the image, even if you've never been there. The long black cloak, the stiff hat, the leather gloves, and that bird-like mask with the curved beak, stuffed once with herbs and flowers to keep out the bad air. That shape has become a symbol of fear, hasn't it? You see it on posters and costumes now. But down in Mary King's Close, it feels different. Older. Heavier. Some visitors swear they've caught a dark, tall shadow in their photos. A figure shaped like that doctor, standing still at the far end of a passage they could have sworn was empty. The guides sometimes notice it too. A sense that someone is standing just behind the group, listening. Not hostile, just watching. A man who once went from house to heal, now pacing forever between rooms of people he couldn't save. When you strip away the jump scares and the ghost tour theatrics, that's what Mary King's Close really is. Not just a haunted street, but a place haunted by memory. Every echo of a footstep that isn't quite yours. Every breath of cold air on your cheek when no one is near. Every toy left on that stone floor. It's all a fragment of lives that played out beneath the city and ended there. History doesn't just disappear. It sinks, layer by layer, a little deeper under the stones. So if you ever find yourself in Edinburgh, walking along the Royal Mile at night, and you pass one of those narrow wynds leading down into shadow, pause, just for a moment. Stand still. Listen. If you hear the faint creak of a cart that isn't there, or the soft tap, tap, tap of knuckles on stone, or feel something small tug gently at your sleeve, don't panic. Just whisper hello, because maybe, just maybe, Elsie has come to see if you've brought her a toy. Back then, they called it the Haunted Full House. Not because it was always sold out, but because people swore every seat was taken, just not by the living. The place was called Harbor View Theater. It stood on Lockhart Road in Wan Chai, where there's just an ordinary glass and concrete office block now. If you walk past number 39 today, you'd never guess that 50-odd years ago, it had a reputation as Hong Kong's most cursed cinema. Before the theater, that plot of land held a funeral home. Celestial Rest Funeral Hall. Incense, chanting, the clatter of joss sticks, families in white. For decades, it was a place soaked in grief. Then, in the mid-60s, the funeral hall moved out, and someone decided, you know what this site really needs? A luxury cinema. Harbor View opened in 1965 with a glamorous Italian film, Girl from Rio. Huge poster of a woman in sunglasses smiling over the harbor. Inside, it was state-of-the-art for its time. Over 1,200 seats, 70mm stereo projection, plush red carpets, and this very stern sign at the entrance that said, "Improper attire will not be admitted." No slippers, no singlets, no nonsense. But luxury doesn't mean safe. The first story people still talk about began, as these things often do, with a death. One humid evening in 1971, a young woman named May went to the movies with her friends. About halfway through the film, she excused herself to use the ladies' room. Nothing dramatic. She told her friends, "I'll be right back," and slipped out into the dim corridor. In the restroom, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. May finished, went to wash her hands, and as she turned off the tap, she glanced up at the mirror. There was a woman standing behind her. May hadn't heard the door open. The stranger had long, damp hair that clung to her cheeks, and her skin looked wrong, almost waxy. At first, May thought, oh, she must have come from the rain. But then her brain caught up with what her eyes were seeing. The woman had no face. Where the features should have been, eyes, nose, mouth, there was just smooth, pale skin, like a mannequin left too close to a flame. In the mirror, the faceless woman leaned slightly forward, as if trying to see May more clearly. May spun around. Nobody. Just empty air, a row of sinks, and the stall doors. Her heart started pounding. Slowly, trembling, she looked back at the mirror. The faceless figure was closer now. Much closer, as if she were pressing against the other side of the glass, about to push through. The waxy skin seemed to swell, the blank surface tilting toward May. That was when May started screaming. She bolted out of the restroom, barefoot, one shoe in her hand, and ran all the way to the lobby. Witnesses said she stumbled at the base of the staircase, clutching her chest, still screaming that there was someone in the mirror. An ambulance took her away. She died in hospital a few hours later. The doctors called it sudden cardiac arrest. Locals said she'd been scared to death. And that was the first chapter of Harborview Theater's haunted reputation. Now, by the 1970s, Wanchai was full of cinemas competing for audiences. Neon signs, double features, midnight shows. It was noisy, colorful, alive. But the stories coming out of Harborview were different. They spread quietly at first, from ushers to cleaners, then out into the streets, into dai pai dongs and barber shops. The most famous one was the story that gave the place its nickname, the Full House. One stormy Thursday night, the rain was coming down in sheets. You know the kind, when the streets turn into mirrors. Hardly anyone wanted to go out, so the box office at Harborview sold maybe 30 tickets, 40 tops. It was a miserable night for business. My friend's uncle, a man everyone called Ah Fai, was working as an usher then. He told this story so many times he could recite it in his sleep. Inside, the hall was hazy with cigarette smoke, that usual blue-gray fog that used to hang in old cinemas. The exit signs glowed a sickly green along the walls. Nothing unusual, except every seat was occupied. row after row, from the front all the way up to the balcony. Every seat held a dark shape, not moving, not chatting, not crinkling snack wrappers, just sitting. At first he thought, oh, maybe we got more walk-in customers than I realized. But then he tried to count. You know how, sometimes, your brain refuses to accept what you're seeing? He told me it felt like his eyes kept sliding off those shapes, like oil on glass. He stepped a little further in, letting his eyes adjust. Under the faint light from the screen, the people seated there didn't look quite right. Too still. Too flat. As if the seats themselves were casting shadows in the shape of bodies. He turned, went back out to the box office, and asked the cashier, "Hey, how many tickets have we sold?" She glanced at the stub rack and said, 32. Why? He didn't answer. He just went back in, stood by the door until the film ended, heart in his throat, watching those unmoving silhouettes. When the credits finally rolled and the house lights came up, reality snapped into place. Only about 20 people stood up to leave. The rest of the seats? Empty. Nothing there. No one had slipped past him. He'd been standing at the only exit. He went home that night with a fever and didn't go back to work for a week. Not long after, he quit. From then on, staff joked nervously about Harborview's other audience. The ones who didn't buy tickets yet somehow always made... There was another favorite among the staff. The one they told each other when they were having a smoke break. The borrowed light. This one happened to a projectionist everyone knew as Mr. Lau. He'd worked at Harborview long enough to think he'd seen everything. One quiet night after the last show, he stepped out onto the stairwell between the second floor and the roof. The air was cooler there, a little breeze slipping in from a tiny, grimy window. He leaned against the railing, lit a cigarette, and enjoyed those few minutes of silence. After a while, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He figured it was one of the younger ushers sneaking a smoke, so without turning around, he said, "You know the manager hates it when you come up here." A soft voice behind him replied, very politely, "Sorry to bother you. Could I borrow a light?" Lau rolled his eyes, flicked his lighter, and turned. The flame flared to life, casting that small circle of warm glow we all know. Within it stood a man he didn't recognize. Not one of the staff, not a regular patron. The stranger wore plain, slightly old-fashioned clothes, like something from 10, 20 years earlier. His skin was the color of someone who had been underwater too long, a flat, unhealthy gray. What made Lau's breath catch wasn't the clothes, though. It was the stranger's eyes, sunken, ringed with darkness, as if sleep had abandoned him years ago. The man leaned forward to light his cigarette. The flame passed so close to his face that Lau swore he should have felt the heat on the stranger's skin. But there was nothing. No warmth, no sweat, no breath. The cigarette caught. The stranger straightened, gave him a small nod and said, "Thanks." Then, in the next blink, the stairwell was empty. No footsteps going up or down. No door opening. Just Lau alone, lighter still in his hand. the air around him suddenly cold. He later told people that the worst part wasn't the man disappearing. It was the smell that lingered. Not cigarette smoke. The faint, stiff smell of old incense and wilted funeral flowers. Those were just the big stories. There were dozens of smaller ones, told in snatches over mahjong tables and late-night suppers. One cleaner claimed that once, after a matinee, she found what looked like an old man curled up under the back row, eyes closed as if asleep. When she called to him, he didn't respond. She turned to fetch another staff member, and by the time they came back, there was nothing there. Just an imprint on the dusty floor where a body might have been. A ticket taker said she once accepted a ticket from a very polite, very pale woman in a cheongsam. The stub felt odd in her hand, heavier somehow. When she glanced down, it wasn't a printed ticket at all anymore, but a pair of tarnished coins with square holes in the center. The kind used as funeral offerings. When she looked up in shock, the woman had vanished into thin air, nowhere to be seen in the small, almost empty lobby. Someone else swore that in the men's room, the mirror would occasionally fog over even when it wasn't humid, and a single handprint would appear on the glass from the inside. By the early 70s, Harborview Theater was known all over Hong Kong as the most haunted cinema in the city, a crown no other cinema wanted. Depending on who you asked, the reason was different. Some people said rival cinemas made the rumors up to wreck business. Others pointed at the building's past, a former funeral hall, a place thick with yin energy, where the border between the living and the dead was already thin. A few feng shui masters shook their heads and muttered that no theater built on that kind of ground could ever prosper long-term. Doomed from the start, they said. In the end, it wasn't a ghost that killed Harborview. It was money, but the stories didn't go anywhere. Today, office workers swipe their cards and hurry through corridors where ushers once heard whispers in the dark. There used to be a nightclub in the basement. Dim lights, heavy bass, cigarette haze. And some staff there claimed that, every so often, between the flashes of the strobe lights, they'd catch glimpses of extra silhouettes on the dance floor. People who didn't quite match the beat. People who vanished when the light came back on. By day, it's all business suits and takeaway lunches. By night, well, who's counting? Maybe what makes Harborview so fascinating isn't whether it was really haunted. Maybe it's what it mirrors back to us. In one address, you've got a whole slice of Hong Kong's soul. Traditional funeral rites and incense smoke. The golden age of cinema with its cigarette-filled halls. And then the sleek corporate towers of the present. Half a century of transformation piled on top of itself, like layers of film reels. We like to think we leave the past neatly behind when we build something new. But deep down, I think we know better. The reflection in the glass has always been us. Our fears, our superstitions, our memories of what used to stand where our offices now are. And just like in that auditorium on the stormy night, when the lights come up at the end of the film, maybe only a few seats appear occupied. But every city has its ghosts. So if you're ever walking down Lockhart Road late at night, and the street is quiet, and the office windows are dark, and you feel someone tap your shoulder, don't be too quick to turn around. because you might just hear a polite voice at your ear asking, "Mate, could I borrow a light?" So picture this. You're in the middle of Dundee. All the usual stuff is around you. The traffic, the shops, the coffee places that never seem to close. And right in the middle of all that noise, there's this old, walled cemetery that most people hurry past without really looking. That's the Houff. It doesn't look huge at first glance, but it feels dense, like the ground is heavy with stories. Cobblestones under your feet, crooked old stones leaning every which way, trees that look like they've been listening in on secrets for centuries. The place goes all the way back to the 1500s. The story goes that in 1564, Mary, Queen of Scots, gifted this bit of land to the people of Dundee. Before that, it was a garden belonging to a Greyfriars monastery. Imagine that. A peaceful garden becoming the main cemetery for an entire city. Over the years, it turned into the resting place for just about everyone. Merchants, shipbuilders, weavers, children, rich folks with grand carved stones, and poor families crowded together in unmarked patches of earth. The 9 trades of Dundee, all these powerful guilds, used to meet there too. They'd gather among the graves to make decisions that shaped the city, like it was the most normal thing in the world. By now, they say tens of thousands of people have been buried there. Some folks reckon over 70,000 souls. Sailors, immigrants, workers, and more than a few who met very bad ends. And the Houff remembers them. During the worst of the disease years, things got grim. In the 1830s, when cholera swept through the city, Dundee was hit hard. Imagine bodies coming faster than anyone could bury them properly. In one corner of the Houff, they dug what people came to call the cholera pit, a mass grave where victims were laid to rest quickly, one after another. If you go there on a misty evening, and I have more than once, it feels different in that spot, colder somehow. People have claimed to hear low sounds under the earth, faint sobbing, or what they describe as almost like someone trying to speak through a wall. Others have taken videos or voice recordings, and only later, playing them back at home, heard odd thumps, little gasps, or a strange murmuring they swear wasn't there at the time. And then there were the resurrectionists. Back in the Victorian era, when medical schools needed bodies to dissect, and the law didn't exactly make that easy, men started digging up fresh graves to sell the corpses. The Houff was one of the places they targeted. Picture that for a second. Families doing their best to lay someone to rest. And in the dead of night, someone comes with shovels and hooks, hauling them back up for money. The city tried to stop it, of course. They put up watch houses and higher walls, ironwork on graves. But even now, people say the place carries this feeling of being disturbed. Not just by death, but by what came after death. And then there's the story everyone in Dundee seems to know. In one form or another, the witch. Her name in the version I first heard wasn't Grisel Jaffray, like some of the history books say. The old woman who told me the tale called her Elspeth Kinnaird. She said Elspeth was accused of witchcraft in the late 1600s. 1669 if you want to be precise. No real proof, just gossip, fear, and the kind of convenient accusations that got rid of anyone who didn't fit in. Elspeth was condemned and burned, and they say her remains now lie somewhere connected to the house. There's a small, worn stone pillar there that people point to as hers, even if the truth is a bit tangled by time. Folks leave coins on it these days. Tiny offerings, like they're trying to say, "We see you, we're sorry." But there's a warning that goes with it. He took the coin back in the end. Some people say if you touch that stone and close your eyes, you might hear a woman's voice right in your ear, whispering, "Give me back my name." Or, "Clear my name." Not a scream, not a wail, just this raw, tired plea. The house doesn't just have one ghost story, though. It's full of them. In the late 1800s, there's a report of a police officer on patrol at night. He's walking his beat, cutting through the cemetery, when he spots a dark figure drifting between the stones. Not walking, not stumbling, gliding. The officer called out, thinking it might be someone up to no good, but the figure didn't react. It turned, slowly, and then just disappeared into the shadows. That wasn't the first strange sighting, and it definitely wasn't the last. People still talk about phantom footsteps walking alongside them when the paths are otherwise empty. You stop. The steps stop. You walk again. They pick up too. Just half a step behind. And then there are the chains. Some say you can hear them on still nights. The sound of something heavy being dragged lightly over stone, scraping along the old cobbles. There's this theory that it's the spirits of the resurrectionists, doomed to pace the graveyard they plundered, forever searching for bodies that aren't there anymore. In the 20th century, when Dundee started modernizing, the house went from being this mostly private, local place to somewhere tourists might wander into. People come for the history, for the pretty carvings on the stones, the dates worn thin by weather. But a lot of them, if they're honest, come hoping to feel something, to brush against the edge of whatever still lingers there. And here's the thing. Even if you don't see a ghost, the house gets under your skin. You stand in the middle of it, and you're surrounded by centuries of grief and love and fear and ordinary lives that ended in very ordinary ways. Disease, accidents, old age, violence, witch trials. It's all layered there, right under your feet. I think that's why the house still haunts Dundee. It's not just the mass grave from cholera, or the disturbed rest of those dug up for science. It's not only Elspeth Kinnaird and her supposed curse. It's the reminder that the city wasn't always coffee shops and student flats and bright glass buildings. There was a time when death felt closer, more visible. And this little patch of ground saw all of it. Walk through Dundee today and it's easy to forget. You see the buses go by. You hear music from bars. You watch people rushing to work. Life moves fast, and the past gets paved over with new roads and shiny windows. But then you turn a corner, and there are the gates of the house. Iron bars, old stone, and beyond them, a quiet that doesn't quite feel empty. You step inside, and the sounds of the city dull a little. You can still hear them, but it's like they're at a distance. And in that space, you start to notice other sounds. The wind through branches, the tap of your own footsteps, maybe a crow calling from a roof. And if you stand there long enough, you realize something. The dead aren't really gone here. They're part of the fabric of the place. Their stories are in every stone, every worn inscription, every unmarked patch of earth. The house is Dundee's memory of its own darkness. It's a place that says, we went through plagues and fires and trials and fear, and we left marks behind on these stones and on each other. So if you ever find yourself in Dundee and you're walking through the busy center and suddenly notice an old gate you've never paid attention to before, maybe this is your sign to step inside. Walk slowly. Read a few names. Listen properly. And as the fog starts to roll in and the light goes a little gray, you might just feel what so many others have felt before you, that in the house, the past doesn't stay buried. It waits quietly, and it watches you back. So, I was chatting with a couple of friends the other day about weird, supernatural stuff. like you do when it's late and everyone's a bit overtired. I said I've never actually seen, you know, a full-on ghostly figure standing at the end of my bed, or a 9-foot transparent person gliding down the street, or anything like that. But then I remembered this one thing that happened to me when I was a kid. About, 15, 16 years ago now? I must have been around 9. And it properly terrified me at the time. Anyway, let me take you back there for a second. When I was little, my family used to visit my grandparents all the time. They lived in this old, slightly crooked house out in the countryside. I had my mom and dad, my older brother, and my younger sister. Whenever we stayed the night, my sister, let's call her Mia, and I would share the bunk bed in the spare room. I always slept on the bottom bunk, Mia on the top, and my brother Ben had a little room just next door. On this particular night, everything started out completely normal. My mom, her name's Anna, came in to tuck us in and read a bedtime story. We were all piled onto the bottom bunk together with our soft toys, the duvet all scrunched up. That sort of cozy chaos that kids' rooms have at night. Mom pulled out this book called The Paper People. I don't even remember who it was by now. Just that the cover had these big-eyed paper figures holding hands. The story was about a little girl who makes a chain of paper people with her mom, and then they go on these strange, dreamy adventures together. It wasn't meant to be scary, but there was something about the pictures of those flat little faces that creeped me out. You know when something is supposed to be cute, but your brain goes, nope, this is unsettling actually. It was that. So, Mom finishes the story, kisses us goodnight, switches off the main light, leaves the little lamp glowing in the corner, and heads off down the hallway to her room. Mia fell asleep almost instantly. I, on the other hand, could not switch my mind off. I was lying there on the bottom bunk, staring up at the wooden slats underneath her mattress, tracing the little knots in the wood with my eyes. The house felt extra quiet in that way old houses do, like it's holding its breath. Now, outside our room, there was this long hallway. Thick old carpet, kind of a faded green, and it ran past a few doors. The bathroom, the room my brother was in, and then all the way down to my grandparents' bedroom at the very end. And this hallway, it was ridiculously creaky. Not the floorboards, the actual floor underneath the carpet. Anytime somebody walked along it, the whole thing complained. You could always tell where someone was by the sequence of creaks. So I'm lying there, half wishing I'd never let my mom read that weird paper people story, when I hear it. Creak, creak, footsteps. Slow, spaced out. Definitely coming from the hallway. At first I thought, oh, that's just Mom going to the bathroom. Or maybe my granddad getting a glass of water. Totally normal, right? But the thing is, the sound kept getting closer. Creak, closer. Creak, closer. You know that feeling when your body just floods with cold all at once? I got that. My heart started racing, and suddenly every shadow in that room felt too dark, like the corners had grown teeth. Finally, I couldn't stand it. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, padded over to the bedroom door, and opened it just a crack. The very second I pulled it open, Silence. Nothing. No footsteps, no creaks. Just still, heavy air, and the dim hallway light coming from the nightlight near the stairs. I panicked a bit, I'll be honest. I flung the door wide open and bolted down the hallway to my parents' room. And as I ran, of course, the carpet creaked like mad under my feet. So I knew I wasn't imagining what that sound normally felt like. I pushed open their door and peeked inside. My dad, Mark, was out cold, snoring softly. My mum was fast asleep beside him. And there, squashed between them like a little starfish, was my brother Ben, also completely dead to the world. No one creeping around, no one getting up, no one looking guilty of midnight haunting duties. I gently closed their door, suddenly very aware of every noise I made, and walked back more slowly this time. The hallway creaked under my steps just as loudly as before, which somehow made me feel both better and worse at the same time. When I got back to the spare room, I climbed the little bunk bed ladder to check on Mia. She was sprawled out on her stomach, hair everywhere, breathing steadily, totally oblivious. I climbed back down, slid under my blanket, and tried to convince myself everything was fine. And then I heard it again. Creak, creak, creak. Same rhythm, same slow approach. Like someone taking careful, deliberate steps along that hallway, right towards our room. This time, I lay there frozen for a few seconds, heart pounding in my ears. But curiosity won again. I got up, went to the door, and eased it open just enough to peek out. Instant silence. Nothing there. No shadow moving, no figure at the end of the hallway. Just the still corridor and that faded green carpet. I remember standing there, gripping the doorknob, absolutely convinced that at 9 years old, I was about to see something I really did not want to see. But there was nothing. Just me, the emptiness, and that weird, thick feeling in the air you sometimes get in old houses at night. I shut the door, went back to bed, and this time, I just stayed put. The footsteps started again, faint, then louder, then receding, then coming back. It went on like that for a while, and eventually I was so exhausted that my fear sort of dulled. I drifted off into this uneasy, light kind of sleep. The next morning over breakfast, I told everyone what had happened. I described the footsteps, how they stopped every time I opened the door, how no one was there. My dad laughed it off. My brother teased me a bit, and my granddad just shrugged and said he hadn't heard a thing. Later, when it was just me and my mom in the kitchen, I brought it up again because I was still really shaken. And she said something like, "You were probably just half dreaming and thinking about those paper people walking around. Your brain can play tricks on you." Which, honestly, was not the comforting explanation she thought it was. Because now, in my mind, I had paper people silently walking up and down the hallway while everyone slept. So here's where I've landed, years later. Was it just my brain, wound up by a creepy picture book and the natural creaks of an old house? Probably. Old houses are noisy, and kids' imaginations are wild. I know that. But that younger part of me, the part lying under the bunk, listening to invisible footsteps on that creaky green carpet, still wonders if my grandparents' house had something extra going on. A leftover presence, maybe, pacing the hall, minding its own business while I tried to sleep. I don't know for sure. Maybe it was just nerves and a spooky story at the wrong time. But even now, if you put me in a dimly lit, creaky hallway at night, yeah, I'm listening for those footsteps. So picture this. I've been living in this house for, what, a little over 8 years now. From the very first week, my bedroom just felt off. Not, I hate the paint color, off, but someone else is already living here, off. At first it was just my lamp. It would flicker, only in my room, nowhere else in the house. I told myself, okay, old wiring, no big deal, skeptical but playful. I'm good at talking myself out of being scared. Then, stuff started falling. Pens would roll off my desk. Little trinkets would tumble off my bookshelf. At first, I blamed myself. I was like, okay, I'm clumsy. I knock things around. Maybe I shut the door too hard. I even tried to convince myself the walls were shaking things loose or something ridiculous like that. But one night, I decided to test it. I took a paperback, one I'd been reading, and I put it way back from the edge of my desk. Like, no chance it could just slip. I sat on my bed, facing the desk, just watching. The lamp started flickering again, and I swear to you, I watched that book slowly slide, inch by inch, right to the edge, and then drop onto the floor. No draft, no cat, no shaky floor. Just the book, moving by itself while the light flickered like a bad horror movie. That was the moment I was like, okay, I'm not alone in here. After that, I kind of made peace with it. What else was I supposed to do? Move out? So I decided if something was going to haunt my room, we were at least going to be on speaking terms. I named him Trevor. Trevor, in my head, is like this chaotic college bro who never graduated emotionally. Things would disappear, and then show up in really obvious places. My phone would slide a little when I wasn't touching it. My closet door would be cracked open when I know I shut it. Nothing ever felt evil, just annoying. So I'd talk to him. Okay, Trevor, very funny, give it back. Or, dude, not tonight, I'm tired. We kind of settled into this weird roommate situation. Fast forward to, like, a month ago. I start seeing this girl, let's call her Mia, who is also super into paranormal stuff. So of course, I start telling her all about Trevor, my resident ghost jerk. I'm laughing and I keep saying things like, he's not evil, he's just a jerk. He's like a frat boy with too much time on his hands. He's not malevolent, just kind of an ass. And I said it a lot. Honestly, I was probably roasting him harder than usual because I had an audience. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I had this little thought. If he's really here, he can probably hear me. Cut to last night. I'm getting ready for bed. Same routine as always. I turn off the overhead light and just leave my little bedside lamp on. The lamp starts flickering a bit, nothing new. Usually that's when I say, "Good night, Trevor." And sometimes the light actually clicks off right after, like he's tucking me in or something. So this time, I go, "All right, Trev, good night," and wait. Nothing. The lamp just keeps flickering. I wait a few more seconds, roll my eyes, and just flip it off myself. No biggie. I crawl into bed, grab my phone, and start doom scrolling through TikTok like every other responsible adult at midnight. That's when it gets weird. Out of nowhere, I get really cold. And yeah, my room is usually the coldest because the vents are routed here. But the AC was off. It wasn't that normal, "Oh, the air just kicked on" kind of cold. It was that deep, creeping, something standing too close cold. I feel this heaviness, so I lower my phone a little and glance over the top of it, toward my closet. The closet door is half open. Here's the weird part. I'm not frozen. I'm not paralyzed. I'm not stuck in that sleep paralysis thing. I can move. I can breathe. My heart is pounding, but I'm awake. I remember thinking really clearly, okay, so it's not the Hat Man. Great. So then what is it? The figure leans down, close to my face, and then I see it. A face. Eyes closed. No smile, no frown. Just this neutral, blank expression. Like someone just resting their face inches from mine. For a second, we're just there. Me staring up, and this thing with its eyes closed, leaning over me like it's listening for something. Instinct kicks in, and I grab my phone and slam the flashlight on, shining it right where his face should be. Nothing. No one. Just my room. Closet door half open. Bedside table. The usual stuff. The cold is still hanging in the air, but the figure is gone. I was so rattled, I ended up sleeping with the flashlight on. I almost never do that, but I just couldn't make myself turn it off. Every time I started to relax, I'd picture that blank face leaning over me again. And now I can't stop wondering, was that Trevor? Because here's the thing. For years, Trevor has only ever been a presence. Flickering lights, moving things, doors, little pranks. I've never actually seen him. Not like that. Not a full-on figure walking out of my closet and leaning over my bed. So was that him finally showing himself because I kept talking trash about him? Or was that something else? Something using the same space. Maybe using the same tricks. Pretending to be him. That's what really freaks me out. If it's Trevor, I can deal with that. He's a nuisance, but he's never hurt me. We have an understanding. But if it's something else, something that can mimic him, or something that just moved in and decided my room is its new hangout spot, that feels different. Heavier. Darker. And I don't know what it wants. I keep thinking about how to handle it. Sage, prayers, cleansing, salt, protection rituals. I've even thought, do I bind it to something and get it out? Do I try to banish it? But I'm also scared of making things worse by poking at it without really knowing what it is. So now I'm stuck in this weird place where I'm talking to an empty room like, "Hey, Trevor, if that was you, maybe don't do that again." And if it wasn't him, I'm just hoping whatever it is gets bored and leaves. But deep down, I can't shake this feeling. Something in my room has changed. And I honestly don't know if my old, annoying roommate ghost is still the only one living with me anymore. So I'm 31. I work in sales, and Las Vegas is part of my territory. I don't live there, but I'm out there a lot for work. The catch is, my company only reimburses me up to a certain hotel rate, so I'm always trying to find something that's decent but not crazy expensive. On this trip, I see that the Luxor is cheap, has good valet, and it's walking distance from my work event. Plus, I'd never stayed there before. You know that feeling where you're like, sure, it's a little sketchy, but maybe it has some old school charm. That was me. I literally thought, screw it, why not? I walk into the lobby and immediately feel this weird mix of unease and fascination. The Egyptian theme is so dated, it almost feels like a movie set, but the pyramid itself is ambitious. You can tell when it opened it was probably mind-blowing. So I'm standing there like, okay, this is tacky, but in kind of a lovable way. I get up to my room and just start laughing. Out loud. This is, no exaggeration, the worst hotel room I've ever stayed in. It was built in '93, but somehow it feels like '83 pretending to be the future. Everything feels tired. I always book 2 queens when I travel because hotels love to skimp on blankets. My usual move is, take the extra blankets from the second bed, pile them onto the bed I'm actually sleeping in, and make myself a little nest. That's exactly what I did. Important detail, I did not move any pillows. I had enough on my bed already, and if I had added more, I'd be trying to sleep on top of a mountain of pillows. So, blankets moved, pillows untouched. That's locked in my brain. Next morning, I wake up early, do a little workout in my room, shower, start getting ready. Housekeeping knocks while I'm mid-getting dressed. I have to yell, "Occupied!" like 3 times before they finally hear me. Mildly annoying, but whatever. When I leave for the day, I hang the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door, and that sign does not come off for the rest of my stay. Right as I'm almost ready to head out, the fire alarm goes off. And I'm thinking, okay, that's new. Never had this happen at a hotel before. I step out into the hallway. It's that painfully bright, humming kind of lighting, and everyone's trickling out of their rooms half confused. Security tells us our bank of elevators is shut down, but the ones on the opposite side are still working, which basically means the alarm was triggered on our side. So now I'm walking down the fire stairs from the 12th floor with a bunch of other half-asleep people, trying not to trip. While I'm outside, I pull out my phone and Google Luxor fire alarm and see a bunch of posts saying the alarms go off a couple times a month. I'm like, okay, maybe that's just a Vegas thing? I shrug it off and blame it on cheap rooms attracting a lot of chaos. A few hours later, I come back to my room because I want to meditate and clear my head before this big work event. I walk in, beeline straight to the window to check the view, just absent-mindedly doing my routine. Then I turn around and look at the bed. All of the pillows from the second bed, the bed I didn't touch, are now stacked on my main bed. Not tossed, not crooked, stacked, neatly, parallel. 3 high rows, like someone was intentionally arranging them. Nothing stolen. I don't notice anything else obviously moved. But I know, like deep bone-level know, that I did not do that. I don't need to be 100% sure about where I left my suitcase or my shoes, but the pillows? I remember very clearly deciding not to mess with them, but I'm there for an important event, and I'm determined not to spiral. I tell myself, "You're fine. Focus on work." I dim the curtains, lie down on the bed, and start taking these slow, deep breaths, trying to meditate. About 20 minutes in, my manager, let's call her Priya, calls me. She says she needs me to cover a meeting for her, so I snap out of meditation mode, throw my clothes back on in a rush, and head out. I leave the room basically exactly as it is. Curtains closed, pillows still weird, do not disturb sign still on the door. I don't get back until after the event, like 11 p.m. I'm tired. I just want to shower and pass out. I open the door, step inside, and something feels off. It's that instant, wait feeling before your brain catches up. The curtains are wide open. The room is bright from the strip lights, and my stomach just drops. I know I didn't open them. I closed them myself before I lay down earlier. And when I rushed out after Priya's call, I didn't go near them. I start trying to explain it away. I'm like, okay, maybe when I cranked the AC earlier, the draft caught the curtains. They're kind of angled. Maybe they just slid open on their own. Then I think, or maybe I opened them on autopilot at some point and just totally spaced. ADHD brain moment. I actually had to gaslight myself to get through that night. I kept replaying a fake memory of me opening the curtains over and over. I kept insisting to myself, you probably just forgot. You're tired. You travel all the time. This is nothing. But in the back of my mind, I kept seeing that dim room I left earlier, and that feeling just sat there. I decide I am absolutely not showering that night. I don't want to be naked and vulnerable if something is off. It sounds ridiculous when I say it, but in the moment, it made perfect sense. So I just wash my face, brush my teeth, and get into bed. The whole night, I hear bumping, tapping, little sounds here and there. I try to blame it on thin walls and wild neighbors, but every time I peek out, I never see anyone going into or out of the rooms near me. No doors slamming, no drunk people stumbling by, just noise. I end up praying quietly, just asking to be left alone, basically. Eventually, I fall asleep. In the morning, I wake up and immediately look at the curtains. They're shut. Perfectly shut. Not moving. No draft. No, oops, they slide on their own. It's like the room is deliberately trying to pretend nothing happened. Later, I hop on a call with my team and say something like, I'm excited to go home. Weird stuff keeps happening in this hotel. They ask what I mean, so I walk them through the pillows, The fire alarm, the curtains, all of it. One of my coworkers, a Vegas local, let's call him Alex, goes, "Oh, dude, the Luxor? Yeah, that place is supposed to be haunted. Super cursed. Everybody knows that." And I just sit there like, I'm sorry, what? After the call, while I'm checking out, I run into a security guard by the elevator. She seems nice, so I ask her, "Hey, random question. If the fire alarm goes off, does security ever go into rooms even if there's a do not disturb sign? Just to check things out?" She tells me, "Technically we can, but I don't remember us actually doing that." So I tell her about the pillows, then about the curtains. I'm clearly fishing for some kind of, "Oh yeah, that happens a lot." But she's giving me nothing. Total poker face. So finally I just ask, "Be honest with me. Is this place haunted?" She says, "No, never heard that. Nobody's ever reported anything like that to me." And I'm thinking, really? Not one person in this entire pyramid of weird vibes. She's not giving me even an inch. So I finally say, "Okay, be straight with me. Is this place haunted? Do other guests ever report weird stuff happening in their rooms?" She smiles politely and says, "No, never. I'm so sorry someone moved your things. You should file a report." At that point, I'm like, "All right, whatever. Nothing's missing. I just want to leave." I thank her and head out. Outside, I pull out my phone again and search, "Is the Luxor Hotel haunted?" I tell myself if nothing comes up, I'll just drop it. But oh my God, the results are like a wall of, "Yes, absolutely it's haunted." Article after article, videos, blogs, personal stories. It's apparently one of the most famous haunted hotels people talk about in Vegas. Some say in the whole country. Guests describe exactly the kind of stuff I experienced. Objects moving, weird noises, strange vibes, that feeling of being watched. Fourth result down, there's this 3-star review specifically mentioning the 12th floor being haunted. Guess where my room was? Yup, 12th floor, right by the elevators. Smack in the middle of the hallway, basically the most 12th floor room on the 12th floor. When I read that, I just sat there in my car going, Of course I did this to myself for a cheap nightly rate." Then I fall down a rabbit hole reading about the place. Stories about accidents during construction, people saying there are bodies buried under the property, supposed mafia connections, reports of suicides and deaths since it opened, guests finding out someone died in their room years ago, all of that. There are even people saying the shape of the pyramid and the big beam of light mess with the energy. I don't know how much of that is real, but after staying there, I'm not in a hurry to test it. All I know is, I went in just trying to save my company a few bucks and came out with my own little ghost story. I'm never staying there again. Like, I don't care how cheap it is, I'm good. And knowing they're planning to demolish it in a couple of years, honestly, good riddance. You know, this story isn't from my own lifetime, but it took place in my hometown, maybe 200-300 years ago. Where I'm from, we still talk about it as if it happened last winter. The river's still there, the meadow's still there, and the place still carries the name it got from that night. Back then, there were 2 friends, almost like brothers. Let's call them Jusa and Mikel. They were known along the river as the best fishermen in the area. Their lives were the water and the currents. They'd paddle for days at a time, sleep on the riverbanks, and come home with their boats heavy with fish to trade. They weren't selfish with what they knew either. Whenever they could, they took younger people along to teach them how to fish properly, how to read the river, how to gut a fish, how to listen to the weather. It wasn't just about the catch. It was about passing something on. One late summer, they decided they'd go upstream to a hidden meadow. Just a long bend in the river with soft grass and good fishing. A place our people still know. The plan was simple. Paddle up there, fish till evening, stay the night, and drift back home the next day. They thought, maybe some of the kids will want to come. Make it a little trip. As they were getting their gear together, nets, lines, a small pot, a bundle of dry wood, they looked around the riverbank, thinking who to invite. That's when they saw their childhood friend. We'll call her Elle. Elle was down by the water, standing knee-deep along the shore, checking on some reindeer pelts she'd put to soak. We reindeer people do that, you know. Put old pelts in the river so the fur loosens. Later, you scrape it off and dry the hide to make leather. It's hard work. Not pretty, but it's important work. Elle was a little younger than Jusa and Mikel, but the three of them had known each other since they were small. When Elle's family passed through with their herd, she and the boys would run all over town together, climbing rocks, splashing in the shallows, getting scolded for coming home late. Her family were reindeer herders, always on the move with the herd. They came through our town every year, usually around late summer. Jusa and Mikel were different. Their families didn't have reindeer. They lived off the river. Fish, a bit of trading, a bit of whatever work they could get. Now, when they saw Elle that day, she was scraping the fur off one of the pelts, her hands steady, her shoulders tight. They hadn't seen much of her the last couple of years. Not the way it used to be. You see, as a child, she'd been full of life. Laughing, teasing, running everywhere like she never got tired. But something had happened a few years earlier. After that, people said, she'd gone quiet. Didn't smile much. She kept to herself, avoided big groups. So Jusa nudged Mikel and said, we should ask her along. Maybe it'll do her good to get away for a night. Just like when they were kids, fishing, stories by the fire, sleeping under the open sky. They walked up to her. The river was making that soft sound it makes when it's low and slow. And you could hear the scraping of her knife on the hide. They greeted her, joked a bit, talked about the herd, about how the fish were biting, about how the nights were finally getting darker again after the long light of summer. After a while, Jusa said, we're going up to the meadow tomorrow. Just one night. You should come with us. Elle froze for a moment, knife still in her hand. You could see she didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to go. You could see it in her eyes. And part of her was holding back. After a long silence, she just nodded and said softly, right. I'll come."
They pushed off from the shore and paddled upstream.
The river widened and narrowed, twisted and straightened, just like it still does. They reached the hidden meadow as the sky began to turn that deep blue that comes before real darkness. They fished there and had good luck. Enough fish for a proper meal. Fat trout and grayling. They roasted them over the fire, talking and laughing more than they had with Elle in a long time. For a little while, that old spark seemed to come back to her. She laughed at one of Mikkel's bad jokes and even rolled her eyes like she used to. By the time they'd eaten and cleaned up, it was late, and the sky was full of stars. But it wasn't pitch black. There was still enough light that you could see the outline of the trees and the moving river. They lay down on their pelts near the fire, wrapped in their blankets. The flames burned low. Little by little, they drifted off. Maybe 3, 4 hours later, no one really knows how long, they were snapped awake by a sound. A scream. Not a little cry, no. A long, sharp, terrible scream that cut through the night and went straight into their bones. They sat up, hearts pounding, and looked around. The fire had burned down to embers. The meadow was quiet. The river moved like it always did. They saw nothing. Then it screamed again, closer this time. Mikkel grabbed his knife. "Fox?" Jusa whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. Mikkel shook his head. "A fox doesn't sound like that," he muttered. "That sounded like a child." They both turned to Elle. She was sitting absolutely still, staring into the dark tree line. Her face as pale as if all the blood had left it. Her hands were shaking. Then everything went quiet. No scream. No wind. Even the river seemed to hush itself. Trying to calm his own nerves, Jusa laughed weakly and said, "Come on. It's probably just a fox or an owl. What are the chances there's an apara out here, of all places?" And as soon as he spoke that word, it screamed again. So close now, it felt like it was right behind their ears. That was enough for Elle. She snatched up her pelt and ran straight for the boat, bare feet pounding the cold ground. She didn't say a word. She just ran. Jusa and Mikkel looked at each other once, grabbed their own pelts, and bolted after her. They shoved the boat into the river, slipped as the cold water hit their legs, and scrambled in. Mikkel jumped in last and pushed hard off the bottom. The current grabbed them, and they began to drift downstream, fast. The screaming didn't stop. As they moved along the river, the scream followed them through the trees, traveling along the bank, keeping pace. Sometimes it sounded ahead of them, sometimes behind. It wasn't always the same either. Sometimes it sounded like a child crying, sometimes like something caught between a sob and a howl. But it never touched the water. That's one thing we say about an apara. It won't go into the river. No matter how fast it can run, the water stops it. Still, that doesn't help much when it's following you from the shore. After a while, with the boat gliding quickly on the current, the three of them just sat there, listening to that horrible sound moving through the dark forest. Mikkel's arms were tired from paddling, and he was shaking with anger and fear. Finally, He couldn't take it anymore. He stood up a little in the boat, just enough to see over the side, and shouted toward the forest. "Show yourself!" And it did. A small figure stepped out of the bushes onto the riverbank. A little girl, maybe 5, maybe 6 years old, no more. Thin, with tangled hair, wearing something that looked like it had once been a dress, but now was just rags hanging off her shoulders. The screaming stopped. The boat drifted, the water whispering around it, and the three of them stared back at her. She didn't move closer, didn't step into the water, just watched. Nikel's voice was shaking, but he called out to her. "Listen, we're sorry if we disturbed you. We haven't done anything to you. We're not the ones who left you out here to die. Go find the one who abandoned you. Go after them, not us." The little girl just kept staring, not blinking, not speaking. Her eyes didn't leave them for even a moment. Then, without warning, it happened. There was a sharp, sickening sound beside Mikkel, a cracking, like a breaking branch, only too close, too real. Elle's head snapped to the side in a way no living neck should ever move. Her body jerked, and before either of them could grab her properly, she toppled over the side of the boat and into the river. They plunged their arms into the water, pulling her up as fast as they could, but the moment she hit the river, she was gone. No breath, no movement. Her neck was twisted almost all the way around. When they looked back to the shore, the child was gone. The river carried them the rest of the way home in a silence that felt heavier than any scream. When they reached the village, they told Elle's family what had happened. The others listened with wide eyes and pale faces, but when they came to the part about the Eperos snapping Elle's neck after Mikkel shouted at it, there was a different kind of silence. One full of something like understanding and dread. Elle's mother finally spoke. She told them that a few years earlier, when they were by the coast, Elle had met a Norwegian man. He wanted her in the way some men want a woman for a night and nothing more. The Sami, back then, were often treated as less than human. So when Elle became pregnant, the man wanted nothing to do with her or the child. In those days, having a child outside of marriage brought heavy shame, not just on the woman, but on her parents, her siblings, everyone. Elle told her family she was with child, and together they decided that no one else could ever know. She hid her pregnancy as best she could, under loose clothes, under silence. When the child finally came, she didn't bring it into the village. Instead, she carried the newborn deep into the forest, far from any path, far from any home, and left it there. Left it alone. Left it to die. After that, Elle was never the same. That bright spark she'd had as a girl, gone. She avoided people, she avoided laughter. She carried that secret like a stone in her chest. So when the Eperos heard Mikkel shouting, "We're not the ones who left you," it knew exactly who had. It had run along the river, keeping to the shore, screaming and following them, not because of Jusa or Mikkel, but because of Elle. Because it had found its mother. Elle was buried not long after, and the place on the river where she died, where that unseen hand twisted her neck, is still known among us as Eperasfieldma, the Eperas's Bend. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is an Eperas? In the old days, when a baby was born sick, with a disability or, like in this story, outside of marriage, Some parents didn't have the heart to kill the child with their own hands, but they also didn't dare keep it. Out of fear or shame or both, they'd take the baby out into the wilderness. They'd leave it there, alone, to die slowly in the cold and the dark. And those children, they didn't always stay gone. What came back was called an eparas. There's only one way to truly help an eparas move on. You have to treat it like the child it once was. You have to baptize it, give it a name, acknowledge it. Only then can it find rest and leave this world behind. The child in this story never got that. No name, no proper farewell. Just the cold forest floor and a slow death. And later, a mother who tried to run from what she'd done. In the end, though, it wasn't Jusa or Mikkel it wanted. It was the one who had left it behind. So when people in my hometown paddle past Eaparas Fieldma, even today, they tend to grow quiet. Some make the sign of the cross, some whisper a prayer. Some just listen to the river and hope it's only the water they hear. Because nobody wants to hear a child's cry in the forest at night. Not there. Not anymore. Paranormal M unlocks the secrets of the supernatural. From cursed relics to haunted places, we explore them all. Subscribe now. The shadows won't wait. Okay, so I've got to tell you this thing that happened. And I swear, I know how crazy it sounds, but it's been stuck in my head for weeks. So, my name's Lena, and this happened about a month ago. My friend Marco and I were spending the weekend in a city we barely know. Like, we've been there once or twice, but we're basically tourists. It was a Saturday evening, super crowded, you know, people everywhere, street performers, traffic noise, all that. We're just walking, talking nonsense, doing that slow, aimless stroll you do when you've got nowhere to be. We must have walked past hundreds of people, maybe more. Just faces, faces, faces. And then we passed this little corner cafe, the ones with those tiny round tables outside, fairy lights, plants in pots that are a little too dry. Most of the tables are full of people facing each other, chatting, drinking wine, looking at their phones. But at one table, there's this woman. She's sitting alone at table 7. I know that because the number was printed on this little metal stand in front of her. And unlike everyone else, she's not turned toward her drink or her phone or whoever she's with. She's sitting straight, facing the street, facing us, like she's waiting. And I swear, the second our eyes met, everything just went weird. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking? It was like that, but in reverse. The street was still loud. People were still walking. But for a second, it felt like someone hit mute on the whole city. It was just her and us, and this pressure in the air. She didn't look scary or anything. Dark hair in this messy bun, green eyes, simple black dress, a red coat over the back of her chair. Honestly, she was really pretty. She had this tiny, polite smile on her face. Not friendly, not creepy. Just like she'd been expecting us, and we were right on time. And my whole body just went, nope. I glance at Marco, and he has the exact same look I'm pretty sure I have. We walk past her, don't say anything, but a few steps later we both stop at the same time. We turn to each other like, "Did you feel that?" And he's like, "Okay, I thought I was going insane." We couldn't explain what was wrong. She looked completely normal, but it felt like she didn't belong there. Like someone cut her out of one photo and pasted her into another one with bad Photoshop. The more I think about it, the more it feels like she wasn't real. I know how that sounds, but that's the closest I can get. So, obviously, because we're uncomfortable, we start joking about it. That's our coping mechanism. If we're scared, we turn it into comedy. We keep walking, and Marco goes, "Madam Table 7 has foreseen your destiny," and starts doing this fake fortune teller voice. I play along, like, "Oh yes, she knows I'm gonna lose my keys and trip over a dog and spill coffee on myself today." We're laughing, making up stupid predictions. Stuff like, "Before tonight is over, we'll see a guy in a yellow suit. Somebody's going to drop a whole cake. You'll hear your name from a complete stranger." Just random, weird things. Because why not, right? And then they start happening. We turn into this side street with a tiny park, and there's a wedding shoot going on. The groom, he's in this absolutely ridiculous bright yellow suit. Not mustard, not beige, cartoon yellow. Marco and I just freeze and stare at each other. We try to brush it off, like, okay, coincidences happen, whatever. Then we pass a bakery. Right as we're going by, this teenage kid walks out, trips on the curb, and drops an entire cake. Like full-on, decorated, birthday-level cake. It explodes on the sidewalk. People are gasping, the kid's swearing, the staff runs out. Marco just looks at me like, "You're kidding me." And I'm like, "No. Nope, not doing this." Now we're both nervous laughing, but it's that shaky laughter where you're actually freaked out. We kind of stop playing the prediction game after that, because it doesn't feel funny anymore. Then the third thing happens. We're waiting at a crosswalk. The little red man is still red. Cars are going by, and there's this group behind us chatting. Out of nowhere, someone behind me says my name. Clear as day, exact pronunciation. Not a nickname, not some common word that sounds like it. My name. I turn around instantly. I'm expecting someone I know, right? But it's just 3 tourists talking in another language. Nobody is looking at me. No one's made eye contact. They just keep chatting like nothing happened. Marco didn't hear it, but I know what I heard. And it felt exactly like when she looked at us. At that point, I'm done. I tell him I want to go back to the hotel. We get takeout, put on a movie, try to forget it. By the next day, we've sort of pushed it down into that box in your brain labeled, "Weird stuff, do not open." But here's the thing. It didn't go away. For the whole week after that, I felt off. Little things kept going wrong in ways that felt connected, even if logically I know they probably weren't. My phone glitched. Important emails vanished and then reappeared. I kept waking up at the same random time in the night, like my brain was on alert. Marco and I didn't bring her up at all. We kind of silently agreed not to. Then, one night, I text him like, "Okay, I need to talk about the woman at table 7. And he replies, "Thank you." I thought I was crazy. So we get on a call and talk everything through. The eye contact. The weird glow she kind of had. Those messed up predictions coming true. And because neither of us knows anything about spirituality or the occult or whatever, we decide to post about it online. Not like, OMG, witch help, but more like, hey, this weird thing happened. Is there a name for this? Is it just anxiety? Sleep deprivation? Something? Most people don't say much. A couple of, sounds creepy, LOL. A few, probably just coincidences. But one person replies with this super serious tone, right? They send us this short phrase in some forbidden language, according to them. They're like, "If you see her again, say this out loud. She will have to obey you." And even though we don't believe it, that message just hits wrong. Like, I don't want to mess with something I don't understand. Even if it's probably some edgy teenager making stuff up. But curiosity wins, so I copy the phrase and paste it into a search engine. I just want to see if it's from a movie or some creepypasta or something. Except, nothing normal comes up. The first result is one of those auto-generated AI overviews, where it tries to explain what you meant. It clearly thinks I'm searching for something else entirely. And that would be fine, except the summary starts with about 10 words, and my full legal name is just there, in the first line. Not my username, not my nickname, not a common name. My exact full name, spelled correctly, in the first sentence of a paragraph that has nothing to do with what I typed. I just stare at the screen and my stomach drops. Like that feeling when you miss a step on the stairs. I refresh the page. It's still there. I show Marco. He goes quiet. And that's when it stops being funny at all. Since then, it's like my brain has been stuck in this loop. Was she something else? Did we accidentally step into someone's story that wasn't ours? Or are we just building a whole horror movie in our heads out of coincidences and bugs and algorithms being weird? Part of me keeps thinking, you're overreacting. The human brain is amazing at finding patterns. You saw a pretty woman with intense eye contact, then you made some dumb jokes, then random stuff happened. End of story. But another part of me can't shake that moment on the street. The way everyone else felt like background characters, and she was the only one in focus. The way it felt like we were the ones being watched. And I don't know. I'm not here to convince anyone it was supernatural or cursed or anything like that. I honestly hope it wasn't. I just needed to say it out loud, you know? To get it out of my head and into words. So yeah, that's the story of the woman at table 7. If it's all just coincidence, then fine, I'll take that. But if it's not, I really hope I never see her again. A couple of months ago, my wife Lena and I were dog sitting for our friend Maya. She's got this tiny, overconfident beagle named Biscuit. Biscuit eats this fancy wet food that comes in these flat pouches. Bright teal, huge logo, little cartoon carrots on the front. You could spot them from across the street, easily. Maya drops Biscuit off with his little overnight bag and 4 food pouches. 4. I remember counting them. We lined them up on the counter, next to the toaster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Biscuit stays the weekend, eats 3. 1 pouch left. When it's time to take him home, I go to grab that last pouch so I can send it back with him. And it's gone. Not behind something. Not must have slipped under the mail. Just not there. I check the whole counter. I check the trash. I check the pantry in case I got ambitious and put it away without thinking. Nothing. Lena swears she didn't move it. I definitely didn't move it. Our own 2 dogs, Jasper and Noodle, are big enough that if they'd gotten onto the counter, there would have been shredded pouch confetti and no question what happened. But there's nothing. No mess. No pouch. Just 3 empty teal rectangles in the trash. And a missing 4th. We shrug it off. Maya buys those things by the case, so I take Biscuit home, apologize, and we move on with our lives. Fast forward about a week. I'm in the kitchen making coffee, half awake, and there, sitting right on the counter between the stove and the knife block, a spot we walk past 50 times a day, is that teal dog food pouch. Same brand, same Best By date, same little cartoon carrots smiling at me. Just there. Not under anything, not behind anything, not in a weird corner, not in some oh duh place. Dead center, in plain sight. Like it had been placed there for maximum "are you kidding me" effect. The thing is, Lena and I both remember keeping all the pouches on the other side of the stove, near the coffee maker and the microwave. That's where I'd been opening them and scooping them into Biscuit's bowl. That's where we had lined them up. And yet, now it's chilling in the middle, like it teleported in to say hi. We laugh it off. You know, we're getting older, ha ha, brains are mush, that kind of thing. We make some jokes about poltergeists with opinions about dog food. Life goes on. Then the tuna incident happens. So I'm in the mood for tuna salad. Very glamorous, I know. This requires 2 special tools. Our old manual can opener and this little plastic disc with holes in it. Kind of like a tiny colander. You press into the can to drain it. I have no idea what it's actually called. I just call it the holy drainy thing. Both of these have lived in the same drawer to the right of the stove since forever. Literally decades. The can opener has been there since before I moved in. The drawer could have its own mailing address. I open the drawer. No can opener. No holy drainy thing. Now, this drawer is not some chaotic junk vortex. It's the real utensils only drawer. Spatulas, whisks, tongs, that kind of thing. I pull everything out. I check the back. I check under the drawer, because sometimes stuff flips and falls. I check the dishwasher. I check the sink. I even check the cutlery drawer, because once in a while we get lazy and just toss things in random places. Nothing. It is as if the can opener and the drainy thing just clocked out and left. I end up opening the tuna with a little can opener on my Swiss Army knife. which I have not used for actual camping in a while. I drain it by squeezing the lid down like a college student who just moved out for the first time. I tell Lena later, "Hey, have you seen the can opener?" She says no. I ask about the white plastic drain thing. She looks at me like I'm making it up. The what? I mime pressing it into a can. She goes, "Oh yeah, that." No, haven't seen it. We both look around. We don't find either. About a week later, I'm getting something from one of the deep storage drawers across the kitchen. You know the kind of drawer I mean. The third tier one. It's got the stuff you use maybe twice a year. Skewers, giant serving spoons, one lonely pastry brush. Things that only come out for holidays and when you think, let's try making fondue once every 5 years. I slide that drawer open and there, right on top of the bamboo skewers, is the can opener. Like it lives there. We almost never open that drawer. There is absolutely no reason either of us would have put the can opener in there. It's not like we had a fondue emergency and switched drawers in a panic. I bring it to Lena and go, "You did this, right?" And she just laughs because she thought I was the one who had moved it. We still have no idea how it got there. As for the holy drainy thing, still missing. We keep washing dishes, running the dishwasher, loading and unloading. I check the drawer where it's supposed to live every time I make anything with a can. I check the dish rack, the sink, the drying mat. Nothing. Then one afternoon, I'm putting away dishes and I look over at the dish drainer, and there it is. Just sitting there, on top of a plate. Bright white. Impossible to miss against the dark metal rack. Not tucked under anything. Not wedged somewhere. Right up front. Like it had been there the whole time. Except it hadn't. Because we'd done multiple rounds of dishes since it went missing. I had specifically checked the dish rack. I had checked the dish pan. I had checked the sink. I was hunting for that thing. It wasn't there. And then suddenly, it is. Now at this point, we've got one teleporting dog food pouch, one can opener that took a vacation to the we never open this drawer, and one holy drainy thing that disappeared for days and reappeared exactly where I had checked for it over and over. We're joking about having a helpful but confused ghost, right? Like, thanks for doing the dishes, but why are you putting my tools in the wrong drawer? And then the slipper goes missing. This one's Lena's. Weather starts getting colder, so she pulls out her favorite fuzzy slippers. They're these thick gray ones with memory foam. She wears them every night, takes them off when she's in her recliner in the living room. One evening, she goes to put them on and only one slipper. Now, we have dogs. We know the drill. Jasper and Noodle love stealing shoes, so we assume they grabbed it and dumped it somewhere. I start the standard shoe hunt. Behind the couch, under the dining room table, under the bed, in the hallway, in the dogs' beds. Nothing. The most obvious place to check is under Lena's recliner, because that's where she actually takes them off. It's one of those lift recliners, so when it's up, you can see pretty clearly under the whole thing, just a metal frame and empty floor. I flip the recliner up. I get down with my phone flashlight. I scan the whole area. Nothing. No slipper, no sock, no dog toy. Just dust bunnies and a pen we lost last year. I think, all right, maybe the dogs carried it somewhere weird. So I get serious about it. I grab my super bright LED clip-on light, the kind you stick on a hard hat, and I go full search and rescue mode on the entire upstairs, under beds, in closets, behind dressers, under the desk, behind the laundry hampers. I'm crawling around like I'm doing a home inspection. No slipper. And remember, the dogs aren't allowed downstairs to the finished basement. Doors stay closed. So it has to be somewhere upstairs. But it just isn't. Days go by. Lena wears socks instead, grumbling about her ghost slipper. Then one night, she's sitting in her recliner and she goes, Sam? I come in. She's pointing under the chair. I lift the recliner up, and there it is. The missing slipper is lying neatly under the recliner, not half stuck out, not caught in some mechanism, just gently parked in the middle of the floor under the chair, in the exact spot I had checked before, with a bright light. Twice. Could the dogs have hidden it somewhere, gotten bored with it, and then later carried it back and dropped it under the chair? Sure, that's technically possible. But if they did, they managed to do it without us seeing them, without leaving tooth marks, and somehow chose to drop it right in the one place I had already searched like a crime scene. Now, before you ask, no, we don't have roommates. We don't have kids. We have a Ring doorbell. We lock our doors at night and when we're out. We've got 2 big dogs who go nuts if a leaf even thinks about blowing past our front step. Also, and this is important, we did a massive declutter this year. Like full house, multiple runs to donation centers declutter. The house has never been this organized. If something is out of place, it's obvious. And yet, these things keep moving, disappearing, reappearing, always in some place that's either very wrong for them or very obviously visible in a way that says, you should have seen me here, but you didn't. I don't have a big theory for you. I'm not going to tell you a demon did it, or we live on top of a portal, or time slips are real. Honestly, the most unsettling part of all this is how small it is. It's just normal life, but slightly off. And that's kind of why I'm sharing it with you. Because I have a feeling, I really do, that you have your own version of this. That one sock that showed up in a drawer you swear you never opened. The keys that were allegedly on the counter you looked at 3 times. The book that reappeared on the shelf you'd already scanned. So if you're listening to this while you're washing dishes, or making dinner, or hunting for your own missing can opener, and you feel like the universe is moving your stuff around just to mess with you? Yeah, same. You're not alone. My grandmother, well, my Nana Rose, passed away earlier this year. We were close. After she passed, I ended up with some of her old things. A couple of her antiques, some framed photos, and a laptop that used to belong to one of her best friends, a guy named Mr. Harris, who also passed a while back. So the house is kind of full of memories, you know? Full of other people's energy. Anyway, that's the backdrop. Now here's where it gets weird. So I live with my partner, Mark, and our 2 cats. One of them, Luna, is obsessed, like truly obsessed, with water. If she could marry the bathroom sink, she would. We have to keep the bathroom door closed all the time because she'll drink out of the toilet, and we keep those bleach tablets in there. So keeping that door shut is like rule number 1 in this house. I am religious about it, I close it every single time. One night, Mark had already gone upstairs to crash. I was downstairs. I went into the bathroom, did my thing, shut the door behind me like I always do, and then stepped out onto the back porch to smoke and watch some videos on my phone. I don't smoke inside, so this is my little nightly ritual. Just me, the night air, and some random YouTube rabbit hole. I'm out there maybe, 20, 25 minutes. Long enough that my cigarette's done, the video's over, and my brain's starting to feel a little sleepy. I come back in, head toward the bathroom again, and the door is open. Not wide open, just cracked. Like someone used it after me and didn't close it. And immediately my whole body just chills. Tiny goosebumps everywhere. Because I know I closed that door. I remember the sound of the latch. That's how automatic it is for me. Now, Mark is not as good about it. He'll forget and leave it half shut sometimes. But he was already upstairs, knocked out. There was no one else in the house. And the door was just sitting there, slightly open, like it wanted me to notice. I tell myself, okay, old house. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it didn't catch right. I shut it again, kind of firmly this time, and try to shake it off. A couple days later, I'm sleeping over at my friend Ellie's place. Mark's home alone. Later, he tells me that he was sitting on the couch, scrolling through YouTube trying to find something to watch. The house was totally quiet, and then he hears it. The bathroom door. That same door, downstairs, slowly creaking open. He said it wasn't like a random noise in the distance. It was the specific sound of that door. Hinges, latch, everything. And he knew he hadn't touched it. He knew he'd left it shut. He told me about it the next night after I got home. We were in bed, lights off, just talking before we fell asleep. When he mentioned the door, I felt those same goosebumps rise up again. That little electric feeling on your arms that says, you are not alone right now. And then I told him about my door moment. We just kind of lay there in the dark like, okay, that's odd. Now fast forward to another night. My dad, Dave, stopped by to bring me a laptop I needed for work. He's the type who doesn't really believe in anything paranormal, so it's funny that he's even part of this story. I wanted to show him how ridiculous Luna gets when she plays, so I grabbed her favorite toy. It's one of those long plastic wands with a bunch of strings and a little stuffed bird at the end with tiny bells. She absolutely loses her mind over this thing, running, jumping, twisting, even when I just prop it up and walk away. I pull it out of this drawer in the living room. We all laugh, watching her sprint around like she's in the Olympics. And then Mark looks at me and goes, Okay, can you put that away now? She's driving me nuts, so I'm like, fair enough. I put the wand back in the drawer. I remember closing the drawer. End of story. Toys put away. Later that night, Mark and I are in bed upstairs, lights off. We're in that half-asleep place where your body is heavy, but your brain's still barely hanging on. And then we hear it. The sound of something being batted around downstairs. The unmistakable noise of cat chaos. Little thumps, a faint jingle, that plasticky tapping sound. At first I'm like, okay, they found a bottle cap or something. But it keeps going. So I lean over the railing at the top of the stairs to peek down. And there she is. Luna is on the floor, with that same exact wand toy, strings and little bird and all, just going to town on it. Like I never put it away at all. My stomach just drops. because I know I put that toy back in the drawer. I remember the action of tucking it in, closing it, moving on. I hadn't opened that drawer since my dad left. Mark hadn't either. He doesn't touch their toys unless he's stepping on one. So how did it get out? Did the drawer not close all the way? Sure, that's possible. But even if it didn't, Luna would have had to grab that one specific toy, drag it out, and somehow close the drawer again enough that it looked shut. And the thing is, the drawer was closed when I checked it later. So now we have the bathroom door opening on its own. The bathroom door doing it again when I'm not even home. A cat toy somehow making its way out of a closed drawer. And that's not even everything. There was another night where I walked into the house and it smelled like sage. That soft, smoky, herbal smell. The thing is, I've only used sage once in my life, and it wasn't even in this house. It was at my mom's old trailer, right after Nana Rose passed. We did a little cleansing thing, just the two of us, because it felt right. I don't own any sage here. I haven't burned anything like that in this house. But that night, I stepped through the front door, took a breath, and my first thought was, Nana. It was so familiar it kind of stopped me in my tracks. So now I'm stuck in this space where I'm asking myself, is this my grandmother? Is she just hanging around, playing with the cats, opening the door, letting me know she's here in little ways? Or is it something else? Something that just happens to be attached to the antiques? Or the old laptop from Mr. Harris? Or just the house itself? I don't feel like I'm in danger, exactly. It's more like I'm being watched. Not constantly, just in these little moments that catch me off guard. The open door, the toy on the floor, the smell of sage that should not be there. And honestly, there are times I wonder if I'm just losing it. Like, did I really close that door? Did I really shut that drawer? Is my brain just filling in gaps because I miss my Nana and I've got all of her things around me now? But then I think about how clearly I remember some of those moments. The sound of the bathroom latch. The feeling of pushing that drawer closed. Mark hearing the door when I wasn't even home. And it all lines up just enough to make me doubt my own rational explanation voice. So, that's where I'm at. Living in this maybe haunted house, with a bathroom door that doesn't like to stay shut, a cat toy that apparently teleports, and a random smell of sage that reminds me of the only time I ever tried to say goodbye to my grandmother's spirit. I don't know if it's her. I don't know if it's something else. I don't even know if I want to know. But if you've had something like this happen, little things moving, doors opening, smells that come out of nowhere, just know you're not the only one lying awake at night, listening for the sound of a door you know you closed. Thanks for listening to me ramble about my weird little haunted life. It actually feels kind of good to say it out loud. Wherever you are, whatever's creaking in your house tonight, I hope you feel safe, and I hope you feel held. I want to tell you about something that happened last night, because honestly, I still feel weird even saying it out loud. So it's me, my husband, let's call him Leo, and our 6-month-old daughter, Rosie. We're staying at his aunt's lakeside cabin, Cabin 7. It's old, creaky, kind of charming in the daytime. and a little too true crime podcast at night. We get the guest room upstairs. It's long and narrow with 2 beds, one tiny twin pushed against the wall, and one big old queen in the far corner under the window. There's only enough space next to the twin for Rosie's travel crib. So the sleeping arrangement is, I'm in the little bed next to the crib, and Leo gets the big bed across the room. That detail matters. So last night, around 9:30, I lay Rosie down in her little travel crib right next to my bed. I do the usual routine, sleep sack, kiss on the forehead, soft shushing, and she goes down pretty easily. The room's dark, except for this little orange nightlight that makes everything look, I don't know, kind of sepia, like an old photograph. Once she's out, I crawl into my tiny bed. Leo's already in the big bed, scrolling his phone. After a few minutes, I decide I'm not tired yet and I want to cuddle. So I get up and climb into his bed instead. Here's the important part. I leave my phone over on the twin bed, on the far side of the room, right next to Rosie's crib, screen down. Volume up because I use it as my alarm. I always have an alarm set for 10 p.m. to remind me to take my birth control. It has the same Apple alarm sound every night. This calm, kind of cheesy chime. You probably know the one. So Leo and I are curled up, whispering, trying not to wake her. The cabin is super quiet. You know how, at night in the country, you can actually hear the silence? Maybe a fridge hum, a little lake wind. But that's it. Then, at 10 p.m. on the dot, my alarm goes off. Except, it's not my alarm. At first I recognize the tune. It's that same chime, but louder somehow. Like someone turned the volume way up. And then, layered over the sound, there's this voice. A woman's voice. Soft. Slow. Almost like she's right next to the phone. Singing into it, and she's repeating, over and over, my baby. My baby. My baby. I freeze. Leo freezes. We're both staring into the dark across the room, where my phone and my child are. Leo whispers, what the hell kind of ringtone is that? And I say, that's not my ringtone. That's not anything I have. The voice keeps going, following the rhythm of the alarm, like a lullaby that's trying to match a metronome. My baby. My baby. My baby. And the way she says it, there's no sweetness. It's not affectionate. It's almost possessive, like she's claiming something or someone. My whole body just goes cold. Every hair on my arm stands up, and I get this horrible feeling. I don't even know how to explain it, except that it felt like someone was standing over that little crib. I whisper, Leo, go turn it off. Please, please. He doesn't move. He just keeps staring, like he's rooted to the bed, and then he mutters, nope, absolutely not. So I do it. I throw the blanket off and bolt across the room, and as I'm running over, the voice is still singing, my baby. My baby. I slam my hand down on the screen to stop the alarm. It goes silent, and the silence after is almost worse. Rosie is still asleep, completely out, chest rising and falling, one little fist up by her cheek. She didn't even stir. I grab her. I don't even think about it. I just scoop her up out of the crib and hold her against me. Then I flip on the overhead light. The room lights up, and suddenly it's just a normal cabin bedroom. Beige curtains, wood paneling, old dresser. No mysterious woman standing by the crib. No one in the corner. But I cannot shake the feeling that there was someone, that I just missed her. Leo finally gets up and comes over. He looks at my phone like it's about to bite him. I open the alarm settings, hands shaking, and it just says, 10 p.m., repeat daily, default chime. No custom sound, no playlist, nothing. I check my recently played audio, nothing there either. I just keep saying, who was singing to our baby? Who was that? And Leo's like, it's gotta be a glitch. Maybe a weird ad or some audio bug. Phones are weird. But I know my phone. I know my alarms. I've had that same chime for months. And this wasn't like an ad cutting in. It was perfectly timed, perfectly layered, like it was part of the alarm. I can still hear it in my head, even now, retelling this to you. My baby. My baby. My baby. I ask him, did you change my alarm? Are you messing with me? And he swears up and down, swears on our daughter's life that he didn't touch my phone. He looks genuinely shaken, which is almost more scary, because Leo is the logical one. He's the, there's always an explanation guy. That night, I refuse to sleep across the room. I shove over and make him climb into the tiny twin with me and Rosie. The three of us are squished together like sardines. Every time I start to drift off, I jolt awake because I hear it again in my head. My baby. I check Rosie constantly. Is she breathing? Is she okay? Is she cold? Did anything change? Nothing. She's fine. Peaceful, even. While I'm panicking, she's having the best sleep of her life. Morning comes. Sunlight through those beige curtains. Everything feels less dramatic, the way it always does in daylight. Leo makes coffee, shrugs it off. Phone's glitch, babe. It was creepy, sure, but it's just tech being weird. And I wish I could believe that. I really do. But here's what sticks with me, and I want you to think about this with me for a second. If it was a random audio glitch, some stray bit of code or a half-loaded ad or something, why that phrase? Why my baby? Not hello, not some song lyric, not garbled noise. A clear, calm woman's voice, singing about a baby, at the exact moment my alarm goes off, while my actual baby is lying alone in the dark on that bed. I even tried to recreate it later. I went through every sound on my phone. I Googled like a maniac. Daybreak alarm with singing voice. iPhone alarm creepy woman voice. All of it. Nothing. It's like whatever we heard last night doesn't exist anywhere else. So now I'm sitting here, recording this, in that same cabin, in the daylight, telling you I don't have a neat conclusion. I don't have a rational, oh, and then we figured it out, haha, silly us, ending. All I have is that song echoing in my head, and that feeling that someone, somewhere in this house, or tied to it, or maybe just passing through, wanted to stand over my daughter and claim her, even for a moment. My baby, my baby, my baby. I don't know if it was a glitch. I don't know if it was something else. What I do know is, tonight, I'm sleeping with my phone off, my baby in my arms, and every light in this room on. And if you ever hear your alarm play a song you've never heard before, especially one that knows a little too much about you, I just hope you're not across the room from the person you love most when it starts to sing. You know, every now and then, you come across a story that just refuses to fit neatly into any box. Tonight, I want to tell you about one of those stories. Let's call her Lena Hart, and we're going back to 1993, to a neurosurgery suite where everything was supposed to be controlled, measured, and explainable. So here's the setup. Lena is on the operating table for a high-risk brain procedure. The whole plan is to cool her body way down, drain the blood from her head for a while, and work on an aneurysm that could kill her if it ever burst. This is not a quick appendectomy. This is one of those every second counts, every beep on the monitor matters kinds of surgeries. Now, during a key part of this operation, Lena's brain activity drops into what's called electrocerebral silence. On the EEG, the brainwave monitor, she's basically a flat line. No measurable brainwaves. In that state, as far as we understand it, the brain isn't doing the kind of complex processing that lets you form memories, dream, or hallucinate. And on top of that, the team has gone out of their way to block her normal senses. Her eyes are taped shut. Her ears are plugged with little speakers that are pumping loud, repetitive clicks, around 100 decibels, straight into her ear canals. Those clicks are there to monitor her brain's responses. They're not there so she can hear the conversation in the room. If anything, they're drowning everything else out. So even if, by some miracle, she were fully awake and aware, which she was not supposed to be, Lena wouldn't have been able to see anything. And she wouldn't really be able to hear in any normal sense either. The usual channels of information, sight and hearing, are essentially locked down. Now, later on, when Lena talks about what happened, she describes things that, on the face of it, she shouldn't have had access to. She talks about the surgical tools, not in some vague, oh, they probably used a scalpel and some clamps way, but in a very specific way, describing one that looked more like a kind of electric toothbrush than a knife. She mentions the sound it made, the shape of it, and even repeats little bits of conversation between staff before the surgery reached its most critical point. Here's where the skeptics usually jump in and say, well, that's probably anesthesia awareness. So let's talk about that for a second. Anesthesia awareness is real. It's when someone is supposed to be fully out, but part of their brain is still actually registering what's going on. They might hear voices, feel pressure, or even pain. And it can be really traumatic. But here's the thing. Anesthesia awareness doesn't give you superpowers. It doesn't let you see through tape. It doesn't let you hear clearly through foam earplugs blasting clinical clicks into your ears. It definitely doesn't override the fact that your brain, at that point, isn't showing any electrical activity that would support complex, structured perception and memory. And even if we say, okay, imagine she did wake up a bit, there's still a problem. A lot of what Lena later describes takes place outside where her eyes would naturally point. Think about how you'd be positioned on the table. Drapes over your face, equipment around you, people moving behind your head. Some of the things she talks about the angle of the incision, where certain instruments were placed, weren't even in what would have been her field of view. So awareness alone doesn't really fix this. And hallucinations or dreams don't help much either, because again, her brain is in this artificially silent, shut down state. It's like trying to get a detailed movie to play on a TV that isn't even turned on. If you want hallucinations to explain the story, you have to say, okay, her brain not only somehow produced vivid imagery out of nowhere, but those images lined up with very specific details of the procedure that she could not have seen or heard ahead of time. That's not just a lucky guess. That's a level of accuracy people don't usually get, even when they're wide awake and watching attentively. So if anesthesia awareness doesn't quite do it, and hallucinations don't quite do it, what's left? Well, one possibility people quietly slide onto the table is, maybe they all made it up. Lena, the surgeon, the nurses, everybody in the room somehow decided to collaborate on this weird little story. But then you start asking, why? Her surgeon, let's call him Dr. Kato, was already a respected name in his field. He didn't need a quirky, near-death story to boost his career. In fact, going out and saying, yeah, my patient had some kind of supernatural experience while her brain was offline, would probably harm his reputation, not help it. That's not the kind of quote that plays well in medical journals. And the funny part? He never does call it supernatural. He doesn't go on stage and declare, this proves the afterlife. What he says, when he's pressed about it, is basically, I don't have an explanation. She was in a state where, from everything we know, she shouldn't have been able to access that information. And that information wasn't available to her by normal means. That's it. No book tour, no giant documentary deal. No Dr. Kato's Guide to the Other Side merchant stall. Lena doesn't become some mega celebrity either. She tells her story, sure. But it's not like having a strange experience during brain surgery automatically turns you into a billionaire. There's no obvious fame or fortune at the end of this. If this was a conspiracy, it's honestly a pretty terrible one, because nobody really cashes in. And that's what sticks with me. Because when I talk to hardcore skeptics about cases like this, people who are absolutely convinced everything must have a neat, physical explanation, they almost always go back to the same two things: anesthesia awareness or hallucinations. And look, I get it. Those explanations feel safe. They let us keep the world in a comfortable box. But in this situation, with these surgical conditions, those explanations start to fall apart. You've got a brain that's electrically quiet. You've got eyes taped shut. You've got ears stuffed and flooded with loud clicks. You've got details described that shouldn't have been in view anyway. At a certain point, if we're being honest, we have to admit, the usual explanations just don't fit well here. Now, I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not saying, this proves there's life after death, or consciousness floats around the operating room. What I am saying is, stories like Lena's are really hard to wave away if we're playing fair with the facts we're given. And it's okay to sit in that space of, I don't know. It's okay to say, yeah, that bothers me. That doesn't line up with the way I expect the world to work. For me, the frustrating part isn't skepticism itself. Healthy skepticism is good. It keeps us from believing every wild thing we hear. The frustrating part is when people refuse to update their position even a little, when they bump into something that clearly doesn't fit their favorite explanation. Because in this case, if we take the conditions of the surgery seriously, if we take the monitoring seriously, if we take the medical team at their word, then it was just anesthesia awareness, or it was just a hallucination. Stop being real answers and start sounding more like ways to avoid the discomfort of mystery. So as you're listening to this, wherever you are, on a walk, in your car, lying in bed in the dark, I just want to invite you to sit with that mystery for a moment. A woman on a table, a silent brain, taped shut eyes, plugged ears, and yet, somehow, detailed, accurate memories of what happened around her. You don't have to decide tonight what that means. But maybe, just maybe, you can leave a little room in your worldview for the possibility that we don't understand consciousness as well as we think we do. And honestly, I think that's kind of beautiful. For context, I am not a big believer in paranormal stuff. I'm open-minded, but I'm also the person who Googles scientific explanation after every creepy video. Still, I have this big wooden sign by my front door that says, "Absolutely no spirit boards allowed." I host game nights all the time. Cards, trivia, ridiculous party games. But if someone ever showed up with a Ouija board, I'd walk them right back to the elevator. I always joke that I don't want to accidentally open a portal while people are still eating nachos. Anyway, my mom's been a widow for a long time now. My dad, Robert, passed away when I was in my 20s. We talk about him a lot, but we don't usually talk about ghosts. So we're sitting in her kitchen one rainy Saturday, drinking tea, and she glances at the "No Spirit Boards" sign I'd brought over as a joke to show her. She stares at it for a second longer than normal, and then goes, "You know, there's a reason I don't like those things either." And that's when she tells me this story she'd never told me before. She says it was the late 1970s, when she was about 16. She grew up in a small town, the kind where everybody knows which kid snuck a cigarette behind the grocery store. One night, she and 3 of her friends, Marcy, Lou, and Tina, were hanging out in Marcy's basement. You know the setup already. Wood-paneled walls, that old couch that eats your keys, one dim lamp in the corner. Marcy had found a spirit board at a thrift shop, one of those with the alphabet printed in this overly dramatic Gothic font, and a little heart-shaped planchette. My mom said she wasn't really into it, but she was a teenager, bored, and everyone else was insisting. So they turned off most of the lights, left the lamp on low, and sat in a circle on the carpet. They started with stupid questions like, "Is anyone here with us? Are you a boy or a girl?" And at first, nothing happened. The planchette just sat there, stubborn and still. They were giggling, making fun of it. Then, my mom says, the room got weirdly quiet. You know that moment when everyone stops talking at once, and the silence feels heavier than it should? Like the air is listening too? That. They all put their fingertips back on the planchette, and Marcy goes, "Okay, seriously this time. Who are we going to marry?" Now, remember, they're 16. This is basically the most important question they could think of. My mom swears to me, swears, that they all agreed not to move the planchette. And she believed them. She'd known these girls her whole life. First up was Marcy. The planchette slid to the letters D-A-V-E. Everyone laughed because there was a Dave in their class. But my mom said he barely knew Marcy existed. It felt like the board was just picking random names. Then it was Lou's turn. The planchette moved again. C-A-R-L-O-S. Lou apparently turned bright red. She had a huge crush on a guy named Carlos who worked at the local music store. Nobody else knew about that crush yet. Then it was Tina's turn. The board spelled J-E-R-R-Y. Tina groaned because Jerry was this awkward, lanky kid in their math class who always wore the same windbreaker. She insisted there was no way she was marrying that guy. Finally, it was my mom's turn. She told me, in that kitchen, that even just remembering this moment made the hair on her arm stand up. She put her fingers back on the planchette, and it started to move. Slow at first, then more confidently. It spelled R-O-B-E-R-T. Now here's the important part. At that time, she didn't know any Roberts her age. There was a Mr. Roberts, a cranky science teacher at the high school, but no teenage Robert in her world. They all sat there, half laughing, half freaked out. Then someone decided they'd had enough. They shoved the board back in its box, turned the lights on, and tried to pretend it was no big deal. And in their rush, this is the detail that stuck with me. They forgot to say goodbye. If you've ever used a spirit board, you know that's the one rule even skeptics tend to follow. You always, always move the planchette to goodbye at the end. Close the session. Shut the door. They didn't. Life went on. They went back to school, talked about homework and crushes and music. But the weirdness started almost immediately. At first it was little things. My mom would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced someone had whispered her name directly into her ear. She'd sit up, heart racing, but her room would be empty and still. The radio in the kitchen would flip stations by itself, always landing on static for a second before settling on some old love song. A framed photo would be slightly crooked no matter how many times she straightened it. The family dog would stand in the hallway and growl at a corner of the living room where absolutely nothing was. She figured it was just her imagination until she started hearing similar stories from the other girls. Marcy's bedroom door would slowly open on its own, even when it was locked. Lou swore she heard tapping on her window at night from the second floor. Tina kept misplacing her keys and finding them in the same spot, on top of her dresser, balanced right on the edge, like someone had placed them there. None of it was big enough to prove anything. No flying furniture, no demons, just unsettling, persistent oddness. And then the years started to roll by. Here's the part that made me put my tea down and just stare at my mom. Every single one of those predictions, they came true. Marcy married a guy named Dave she met in college. Lou ended up with Carlos, the music store guy, years later, completely by chance in a different city. Tina, She moved away, swore off that hometown forever, and then reconnected on social media with our old awkward friend Jerry, who, according to my mom, had become surprisingly charming. They got married in their 30s. And my mom? She moved to a new town after high school, got a job at a little bookstore, and one day this guy walked in asking for a book on photography. His name tag read, Robert. She said when she saw his name, her stomach dropped. Not in a bad way, just in a, this is familiar and I don't know why way. She didn't remember the board right away. That came later, after they were dating, when she was lying in bed one night and the name from that teenage seance just popped into her mind like a song she hadn't heard in years. That Robert became my dad. And no, before you ask, she never told him the story about the board while he was alive. She said she was scared it would make their whole relationship feel cursed or scripted, like they never really had a choice. I asked her, so, do you think the board predicted it? Or do you think you just noticed those names because of that night? She shrugged and said, I've heard the explanations. The little unconscious movements, the ideomotor effect, all of that. Maybe our hands moved the planchette. Maybe our minds filled in the blanks. But that doesn't explain why the names stuck. Why they kept showing up. And it definitely doesn't explain why, for years afterward, I felt like someone was standing just over my shoulder whenever I was alone. She laughed when she said it, but it wasn't a funny laugh. It was that soft, tired laugh people do when they've made some kind of uneasy peace with something they can't prove. The strange little things, she said, tapered off after they all graduated and drifted apart. It was like whatever they'd nudged awake finally lost interest. Or maybe, she said, the board never had any power at all. Maybe the real power was their own belief, humming along beneath everything, quietly shaping the choices they made. We sat there for a moment, just listening to the rain hit the kitchen window. I thought about my no spirit boards sign, my insistence that I don't really believe in any of this. And then my mom looked at me and said, you don't have to believe it. But I lived it. And I'm telling you, the night we forgot to say goodbye was the night things stopped feeling entirely like they were just ours anymore. So that's why, at my place, it's board games only. Dice, cards, charades, sure. Laughing, yelling, snacks everywhere, absolutely. But if you ever come over to one of my game nights and you're thinking about slipping a spirit board out of your bag, just look at the sign. And remember my mom, 16 years old in that basement, fingers on the planchette, asking a question that followed her for the rest of her life. I'm in 7th grade, and my family has just moved into this new-to-us house in this quiet little neighborhood. You know, the kind of place where every mailbox has flowers painted on it, and everybody already knows everyone else's business. We buy the house from this family, mom, dad, daughter, and an older son. During the walkthrough, there's this one bedroom with a bunch of holes punched in the drywall, like actual fist-sized holes. My mom asks the owners to patch everything before closing, and they're like, oh yeah, of course, no problem. So, they fix it. We move in. Life goes on. A few months later, it's the start of 8th grade. Instead of the bus, I walk to school because it's just a few blocks away. And on the way, I start talking to this girl who lives 3 houses down. Let's call her Jess. One morning we're just chatting and she goes, "Wait, you live in the White House with the big oak in the front?" I'm like, "Yeah?" And she just kind of looks at me and goes, "Oh, that was Dylan's house. Now I have no idea who Dylan is. So I ask, "Who's Dylan?" She explains that the family who lived there before us had a son, older than us, maybe 17 or 18. She says he was really troubled, into drugs, always getting into fights, and the rumor was he died. Some people said overdose, some said it was an accident. Nobody really knew for sure. Jess knew all this because she was best friends with his younger sister, Lily. And I remember just walking the rest of the way to school like, okay, cool, cool, cool. Totally normal thing to hear about your new house. I didn't think too much about it, at first. So, in our house, the bedroom that ends up being my room, that was apparently Dylan's old room. And inside my room I had a regular closet, but inside the closet there was this little half-size wooden door that led to the attic crawl space. It was low and narrow, one of those places you have to duck into, with exposed beams and itchy insulation. Very cozy, very, you'll definitely see a spider the size of your hand vibes. One Saturday, I decide I'm going to be responsible and declutter. I'm dragging all the stuff I don't want, old school projects, broken toys, random boxes, into that attic space. I'm in there on my knees, pushing a box back, and my hand hits something wooden. I pull it out, and it's this dusty little plaque. On it, in these chunky blue letters, it says, Dylan's Den. You know that feeling when your stomach just drops? Yeah. I just kind of stare at it for a minute, then shrug it off like, haha, okay, weird, and bring it downstairs to show my parents. My mom laughs. My stepdad, Mark, jokes like, hey, maybe you've got a roommate now. And I, for some reason, decide to prop this plaque on top of my dresser, like a genius. Like, yes, welcome, ghost boy. Here's your nameplate. That night, nothing happens. I go to bed, no big deal. The next day, school, homework, normal life. Then comes the day after that. It's a Sunday afternoon. My parents are out running errands, my brother's at a friend's, and it's just me and my dog, Milo, this little mutt who usually doesn't have a care in the world. We're on the couch in the living room, watching TV. There's a floor lamp next to us, the kind with that little metal switch you click with your fingers. Out of nowhere, the lamp just turns on. Click, light. I frown, look at it, and before I can even react, click, off. Click, on. Click, off. Like someone is standing right there, playing with the switch. I figure, okay, maybe it's a short or something. I lean over, unplug the lamp from the wall. And that's when I swear to you, the little metal switch starts clicking by itself. Click, 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 click. No power, completely unplugged. And that switch is just flicking up and down on its own. Milo loses it. He jumps off the couch, starts barking at the lamp, hackles up. I grab him. I'm shaking. My heart is pounding, and I bolt upstairs, slam my bedroom door, and lock it. When my parents get home, I tell them everything. They kind of shrug it off. Old house, weird wiring, maybe air pressure. You're watching too many scary movies. All the classic parent lines. But after that, things start to stack up. Over the next couple of months, I start hearing these creaks on the wooden stairs when I'm home alone. At first I'm like, okay, it's an old house, It settles, whatever. But after a while, I notice there's a pattern to it. It's not random creaking. It's steps. Step. 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 Pause. Step. Step. And always when I'm alone. One afternoon, I come home from school. I'm the last one to leave in the morning and the first one back, so the house should be exactly how I left it. I go into my room and I stop dead in the doorway. I used to keep a row of stuffed animals on a shelf above my bed. That morning, they're all lined up, squished together like usual. Now, every single one of them is sitting in the middle of my floor, perfectly arranged in a straight line, all facing the doorway, facing me. The shelf is a good 10 feet away from where they're sitting. No one else is home. My door had been shut. I just stand there in the hallway like, nope, number, absolutely not. I scoop them up, throw them back on the shelf, and convince myself my brother somehow broke in just to mess with me, even though there's no sign of that, and it doesn't really make sense. But you know, your brain will do mental gymnastics to avoid ghost stuff. Then comes my birthday. My friend's mom is super crafty, and she makes me this giant string light curtain as a surprise. Like those aesthetic fairy lights you hang in front of a door. She weaves in ribbons and little paper stars, tapes and hooks everything, secures it so well it's practically part of the house. I decide to hang it in front of the tiny attic door inside my closet. It felt cute at the time. In hindsight, I just decorated the entrance to my personal horror movie. A couple of weeks go by. One night, it's after 2 a.m., dark, quiet, and I wake up abruptly. No sound, no nightmare that I remember, just that feeling like something yanked me out of sleep. I'm lying on my side, facing the wall. My room is mostly dark, except for this faint glow from the streetlight coming through the blinds. And then I hear it. This soft pop. Pop, pop. Like something tiny is snapping. I roll over just in time to see the entire string light curtain in my closet explode apart. The ribbons break free. The lights drop one by one, and these little paper stars and wires fling out into the room, like someone grabbed it from inside and ripped it toward them. I freeze. I don't scream. I don't move. I just watch as strands of lights fall and scatter across my floor. One of the hooks snaps off and hits the wall near my bed. And behind all that, the tiny attic door is standing open. I shut my eyes, pulled the blanket over my head like I was 5 years old again, and I did not move until I saw sunlight. In the morning, my room looks like a storm hit it. Lights and ribbons everywhere. Little paper stars torn and crumpled. The attic door is still open. I completely lose it. I tell my parents everything. Again. They decide my brother must have done it, but he swears he didn't. And also, my bedroom door had been locked that night. Now I'm really freaked out, but I'm still trying to live my life, go to school, be a normal teenager. Then it's this big religious holiday. My family is Eastern Orthodox, so our services are long and very intense, chanting in Old Slavic, incense everywhere, candles, icons, holy water. We're standing right up front because my mom likes to be early for everything. The priest starts going down the rows with this branch bundle soaked in holy water, sprinkling everybody, and he's swinging this censer with thick, sweet smoke coming out. As he's getting closer to us, I start feeling weird, kind of dizzy, kind of like my chest is tight. I tell my mom, I don't feel good. She whispers, we're almost done, just hold on. The priest steps in front of our row. He sprinkles my mom, then me, then Mark. The incense smell hits me full on. I look at my stepdad and, without even thinking, I say, I'm sorry, and then everything goes black. I drop. Front row, packed church, hard floor. Next thing I know, I'm outside on the church steps, my mom lightly slapping my face, people fanning me, someone pressing a bottle of water into my hand. I'm shaking. I have no idea what just happened, and in my head, there's only one thought. Something in that house does not like this. After that, my mom actually listens to me. I tell her everything again. The lamp, the stairs, the toys, the lights, the attic door. I tell her about Jess and Dylan and the plaque. So we call the priest and ask him to come bless the house. A week or so later, he shows up in his robes, carrying incense, holy water, and a small bottle of oil. Windows open, candles lit. He walks room to room, praying softly in Slavic. He puts a dab of oil above every doorway, tucks tiny paper icons into the frames, sprinkles holy water along the baseboards, lets the incense smoke drift into the corners. When we get to my room, he pauses, just for a second. He doesn't say anything, but he looks at that attic door a little longer than he looks at anything else. Then he makes the sign of the cross, sprinkles extra holy water around the closet, and quietly moves on. After that, everything stops. No more footsteps on the stairs when I'm alone. No more lamps turning on. No more toys moving. No more late night exploding decorations. Milo goes back to sleeping in my room, totally unbothered. The house feels lighter, quieter in a good way. Not that heavy silence that hums with, "You're not alone." Life moves on. I grow up. We stay in that house for years, and as far as I know, nothing else happens. And honestly, I kind of forget about the plaque. Dylan's den. It just sort of disappears from my dresser one day, and I assume someone packed it away or tossed it. Fast forward, like 10 years. I'm visiting my parents, sitting at the kitchen table, and my stepdad comes downstairs from the attic, covered in dust, shaking his head, laughing. He goes, "You are not going to believe what I just found." He holds up this old wooden plaque, all chipped on the edges. Dylan's den. I hadn't seen it in years. I honestly thought I'd lost it or accidentally broken it and blocked it out. Mark says, "It was wedged behind a beam up there, like someone slid it in and forgot about it. I never put it up there. Nobody remembers moving it. It just migrated back into the attic on its own." We just kind of look at each other and laugh it off, like, "Ha ha, guess Dylan wanted his sign back." But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, maybe that blessing worked. Maybe he finally got whatever peace he needed. Maybe the house isn't his anymore. And maybe, just maybe, the attic door staying closed all these years is his way of saying, We're good now. So, every time October rolls around and people start putting up their Halloween decorations, there's this one memory that just grabs me by the throat a little. This happened about 13 years ago. I think it was October 5th, 2011, around 9:30 at night. It was one of those damp, chilly nights. No rain at that exact moment, but the streets were still wet, and there was this low fog hanging under the streetlights. You could see lightning way off in the distance, but it was quiet where we were. My mom's friend Lena, who lived in a subdivision a few minutes from us, posted on Facebook that her cat had gotten out and hadn't come home. He was this chunky orange tabby named Pumpkin, and my mom has a soft spot for any animal in distress, so of course we volunteered. So it's me, my mom, and my younger brother Jame, piling into the car to go help look. We're driving slowly around Lena's subdivision, Maple Ridge. Windows cracked a bit so we can listen for meowing, calling, "Pumpkin, here, kitty kitty." Like that's going to magically make him appear. It's really dark. Most of the houses have their porch lights off already, and the only real light is from those yellowy street lamps and the occasional flicker of someone's TV through a window. My mom has the headlights on bright. I'm leaning forward in the passenger seat scanning the yards, and Jamie's craning his neck to see down driveways. We're rolling down this one long, straight street. No cars parked along it. No people out. Just us. We're on the right side of the road, going maybe 15 miles an hour. And then, on the left side of the road, she is just there. I don't remember seeing her come from a driveway or around a corner. 1 second the road is empty. The next second there's this little girl in the other lane. She looked about 6 or 7. Light skin, dark hair that was kind of messy, like it hadn't been brushed after a bath. She was wearing what looked like a lavender hoodie and shorts. Something you'd expect a kid to wear during the day, not late at night. And she was in a wheelchair. Not a big medical-looking one, but a small chair, low to the ground. Her legs, or what was left of them, ended just above the knee, little stumps covered in socks. She was using her hands on the wheels, slowly rolling herself straight down the middle of the lane, like that was the most normal thing in the world. Here's what really got me. Her posture was rigid, completely straight, almost unnaturally so. She never turned her head. She didn't look at our car, didn't flinch at the headlights, didn't squint or lift a hand to shield her eyes when my mom's high beams hit her dead on. She just stared, straight ahead. We were going in opposite directions, so the actual passing moment was maybe 2 or 3 seconds. But those seconds felt stretched, like we drove through a bubble of silence. Nobody said anything as we passed her. We all just absorbed it. We got maybe a house or 2 past her before my brain finally caught up and went, "Wait, what?" At the exact same time, my mom goes, very quietly, "Did you guys just see that?" Jamie and I both kind of talk over each other. The girl? In the wheelchair? With no legs? and as soon as we all confirm we actually saw the same thing, my mom snaps into action and whips the car around in a quick U-turn. We're all suddenly wide awake, hearts pounding, scanning the road like crazy. We drive back down that same stretch of street, slowly, like really slowly. She's gone. No little girl, no wheelchair, no movement on the sidewalks, no open garage doors, nothing. It's not like there were a lot of side streets for her to turn down either. It was a long, mostly straight run. For her to disappear in those few seconds would have meant turning off somewhere and getting out of sight very fast, which seems unlikely, given the wheelchair and the way she was moving. My mom pulls over and we just sit there for a minute, all of us staring at the empty road. There's that weird, heavy feeling in the car, like everyone is trying to decide if they're going to be the one to say, "Ghost," out loud. Nobody does. Instead, my mom finally goes, "Well, okay. That was strange. Let's, keep looking for Pumpkin, I guess." So we do. We drive around the subdivision for another hour, calling for the cat, looking down every side street, every cul-de-sac. We don't see the girl again. We don't see anyone else, actually. It feels like the whole neighborhood is asleep. Eventually, we hear this faint, pitiful yowling near one of the houses at the very back of the subdivision. We follow the sound and find Pumpkin wedged under a wooden porch, screaming at another neighborhood cat like they're in some kind of dramatic soap opera. Jame coaxes him out, we get him in the car, and we head back to Lena's place. When we hand Pumpkin over, my mom kind of laughs and goes, "You're not going to believe what we just saw while we were looking for him." So we tell her the whole story. The street, the time, the little girl, the wheelchair, how she vanished when we turned around. Lena listens, frowning a little, and then says, "I've lived here for 8 years. I've never seen any little girl in a wheelchair. There isn't anyone like that around here that I know of." And that just makes the whole thing creepier. Life moves on, but I never forget that night. It becomes one of those stories I pull out sometimes, usually around Halloween. Always with that same unsettled feeling in my chest. Fast forward to just a few days ago. I don't know what made me think of it so strongly again. Maybe the decorations going up. Maybe just my brain connecting dates. But I decided to post about it on my town's community Facebook page. I wrote the whole encounter out and then asked if anyone who lived in Maple Ridge back then remembered a little girl in a wheelchair who might have lived on that particular street about 13 years ago. So far, nothing. A bunch of people have commented things like, "I've been here 20 years, never seen anyone like that." Or, "I walk my dog down that road all the time, don't recall any family with a child in a wheelchair." Some people shared their own weird stories, but nobody could say, "Oh yeah, that was so-and-so's daughter." And that's what bothers me. Because if she was real, a 7-year-old girl in a wheelchair, who lets their kid roll down the middle of the street alone at almost 10 at night? On a dark, wet road. No reflective gear, no adult in sight. I even went digging through old local news archives online, seeing if there were any stories about a missing girl or an accident involving a child with a disability in our area. Nothing. Our town is small. If something like that had happened, it would have been all over the place. People still talk about minor fender benders from years ago like they're legend, but there's nothing about her. So I'm stuck with this memory. Me, my mom, my brother. all three of us absolutely certain we saw the same little girl in the same spot, doing something that makes no sense and no explanation. And now, to make it even eerier, they've started a bunch of new construction near that street, tearing up old lots, digging foundations, moving dirt around. Every time I drive past, I catch myself wondering if something's going to turn up. Some old story, some piece of evidence, something that explains where she came from, or where she went. For now, though, it's just this moment, frozen in my mind. The wet road, the fog in the headlights, and that tiny figure rolling steadily forward, eyes fixed straight ahead. Like we were the ones who didn't belong there. Not her. I think I'll be holding my breath about that night for a long time. So, before I get into this, I need to say something up front. I don't really know much about Arabic magic or spiritual practices. I've heard stories here and there, like everyone does, but I never took the time to really study them or think too deeply about it. What I have always had, though, is this sensitivity to the other side, I guess. I get these really vivid premonition dreams, and they've come true often enough that I don't just brush them off anymore. For the past 3 years, my grandmother, let's call her Noura, has been having awful night terrors. There's no medical explanation. We've taken her to doctors, run tests, checked everything. She never had anything like this when she was younger. She tells us that, when she does remember, her nightmares are full of shadowy figures chasing her, grabbing her, crowding around her. But most of them, she doesn't remember at all. She doesn't realize how often she wails or screams in her sleep. I do, though, because I share a room with her. Honestly, I barely sleep. One night, not that long ago, she had one of the worst episodes I've seen. She let out this horrible scream, like a real, from-the-gut scream, and her whole body was shaking. I kept calling her name, shaking her shoulder, trying to pull her back. It took a while, longer than usual. When she finally woke up properly, she clutched my hand and said, very seriously, that she felt like she could have died if I hadn't brought her out of it. And the way she said it didn't feel dramatic. It felt like she really believed it. At that point, a relative of ours, my cousin, Sarah, reached out to a spiritual healer, almost like an exorcist. He's kind of known in our community, not some random person. He doesn't take money, and he only uses religious texts and recitations to try to help people. That part mattered to us. It made it easier to trust him. After he did whatever assessments he does, he told us that there had been some kind of malicious magic done on my grandmother, decades ago. Back in the late 70s, he said. He described it as something written on parchment that had started to disintegrate over time. Because of that, according to him, the entities attached to it didn't really remember what they were supposed to be doing. So instead of carrying out whatever the original intent was, they had kind of devolved into teasing and tormenting her. I didn't know what to do with that information at first. Part of me was skeptical, but the truth is, we had exhausted everything else. No medical answers, no psychological explanation that fit. This was our last resort. He gave my grandmother a talisman to keep near her, something to bring her some relief. But he was very clear, it wasn't a cure. He said the thing done to her was old and deeply rooted. This is still ongoing, by the way. Nothing is neatly wrapped up. Right now, though, Noura is visiting one of my aunts in another city, so I share the room only with my younger brother, Yusuf. I'm a light sleeper, and I wear one of those thick, padded eye masks because any bit of light wakes me up. Sound, too, honestly. Any small noise and I'm awake. Early this morning, just before dawn, I heard the sound of someone sitting down on my grandmother's bed. You know that distinct shift of the mattress and the creak of the frame? It was exactly that. Right after that, I heard soft sniffling, the kind that comes with quiet crying. It sounded like someone was sitting there, hunched over, trying not to sob out loud. My first thought was, why would anyone in my family come into my room, sit on that bed, and cry this early in the morning? I lay there completely still, listening. The sniffling kept going, wet breaths, small, shaky inhales. It sounded real. Then something clicked in my head. The door had never opened.
Our door has one of those dust stoppers attached to the bottom,
And it drags loudly along the floor whenever someone opens it. You can't miss it. If the door moves, you hear it. But there had been no sound, no dragging, no click of the handle, nothing. That realization hit me hard, and I have to be honest, that's when I got scared. I didn't take off my eye mask. I didn't sit up. I just froze. My heart was pounding, and every part of me wanted to peek and see who or what was sitting there. But at the same time, I had this heavy, instinctive feeling that I did not want to see its face. So I did what I usually do when something like this happens. I pretended to ignore it and tried to go back to sleep. This isn't my first haunting, unfortunately, but it is the first time something like this has happened in this particular room. On top of that, I've had 2 very specific nightmares that I can't shake. In both of them, I saw something pretending to be my grandmother. It looked like her at first glance. Her height, her walk, even her voice. But in the dream, it always felt wrong, like someone was wearing her as a costume. The best way I can describe it is that uncanny valley feeling, where everything is almost right, but just slightly off in a way your brain can't ignore. In the first dream, Grandma Nuda was moving around the house, knocking things over, causing little bits of chaos, misplacing items, breaking small objects, then looking at me with this almost playful, mocking smile. In the second dream, I remember sitting at the edge of my bed while she stood in the doorway, just watching me. Same face, same clothes, but her expression didn't match her eyes. Her eyes looked empty, like someone was looking out through them. And here's the part that really shook me. My mother, let's call her Layla, told me about a dream she had recently. She said she saw her own mother doing strange things, out of character, causing mischief, making messes, moving silently from room to room with this eerie calmness. Layla said that in her dream, too, it felt like something was inside her mother, not actually her. We didn't coordinate these dreams. She told me about hers, and when I told her mine, We just kind of stared at each other for a moment. It felt too similar to be brushed off. And it's not just us. Different members of the family have mentioned feeling a presence in our drawing room. That room has always had a strange energy, honestly. People say they feel like someone is standing just behind them when they sit there alone. We've all, at different times, heard phantom sounds. Like someone is working in the kitchen, or moving things in the hallway, or walking up and down the house. You hear a plate clink, or a chair scrape lightly, or footsteps. You go to check, expecting to find someone there, and the room is empty. No one. Nothing moved. Everyone else is in their own rooms, or asleep, or out. So that's where we are right now. My grandmother with unexplained night terrors and a history of something dark supposedly done to her decades ago. A spiritual healer who insists there's old magic involved. Me, hearing someone sit on her empty bed and cry, without the door ever opening. Dreams of something wearing her face like a mask. Mine and my mother's. And a house where people keep hearing and feeling things that shouldn't be there. I don't have a neat conclusion for you. I'm still living in the middle of this. But if you've ever wondered how it feels when the unseen doesn't stay so unseen, it feels like this.